Chapter 13. Sister White. On the other side of the bridge, Xianxia shouted. The music stopped at the pavilion. The white fox stood up and said softly, Brother Zhou, you haven't come to see me for a few days. If Ong Kwangsung knew about the situation and saw the white fox like this, what would they think? Xianxia raised the bag in his hand and smiled. I'm afraid I'm going to annoy you this time. I'm going to stay with you in the cave for a month. The white fox frowned and asked, Why? Master left the mountain for a month. Before he left, he told me to find a secluded place to practice. Xianxia said as he sat in front of the pavilion. The white fox nodded and sat down. She continued to play the zither and sing. The former smiled, knowing that she didn't like to talk much. He took out the mysterious heaven skill from his bag and studied it carefully. After a few days of practice, he felt that the spiritual aura in the air wasn't very helpful to his practice. He took out 2 spiritual stones from his bag and held them in his hands. He activated the mysterious heaven skill and slowly absorbed the dense spiritual aura. When the spiritual stones in his hands became dull, the genuine qi in his body immediately became more vigorous. Xianxia opened his eyes and looked at the stones in his hands. No wonder the cultivators used these things as money. They were really good stuff. A high-grade stone could be exchanged for 100 middle-grade stones, and a middle-grade stone could be exchanged for 100 low-grade stones. The master gave him more than 10 middle-grade stones at once, which were worth more than 1,000 low-grade stones. The white fox was still playing the zither and singing in his ears. Xianxia listened to it for a few days. At first he felt that it was enjoyable, but now he felt that his ears were going to grow calluses. He thought to himself, Sister White, don't you get tired of singing the same song over and over again? He threw the stone in his hand into the pool and called out to the white fox, Sister White. The white fox stopped and raised her peerless face. She asked in confusion, Brother Zhou, what's wrong? After saying that, he glanced at the white shadow that flashed past the cave entrance, but he didn't think much of it. The white figure at the entrance of the cave was the Chu Pinger whom Xianxia had peeped on the body the other day. As soon as she entered the cave, she heard someone talking. When she saw who it was, she was shocked. She did not expect that the pervert was actually talking to that beautiful woman. He hurriedly hid to the side. Xianxia was considering if he should ask White Fox to change the song. With his cultivation, he did not notice anyone at the cave entrance. He smiled awkwardly and said, Sister White, why don't you change the song? I see that you are always singing the same song. The white fox frowned slightly and said, In my early years, I also collected the famous songs of the world, but after that none of them could enter my heart. Ever since I listened to the songs you taught me, I feel that no other song can compare to them. Why should I change? Chu Pinger, who was hiding at the entrance of the cave, trembled and muttered, That song was actually written by that pervert? How is that possible? Sister White's zither skills are unparalleled. How about this? I will compose another song for Sister White, and I will ask Sister White to accompany it with the sound of the zither. What do you think? Xianxia asked. White Fox's eyes slightly brightened. She nodded and said, Brother Zhou is very talented. Sister White has already experienced it. If you can compose another song, Sister White will be more than happy. Xianxia nodded and walked back and forth on the bridge with his hands behind his back. He lowered his head and pondered what song he should choose. It would be best if the white fox could accept it and also make her like it. He could also enlighten her. Otherwise, it would be a pity for a late-stage tribulation passing expert to hide here. He was really made to be a golden bodyguard. The white fox's eyes were filled with anticipation as he walked back and forth in deep thought. Chu Pinger, who was peeping at the entrance of the cave, was also full of curiosity. She did not know what kind of peerless song this ugly pervert could compose. I've got it. Xianxia suddenly clapped his hands and rolled his eyes. He smiled and said, The name of the song shall be Dream of Mandarin Ducks and Butterflies. Sounds like a good song. Sister White will be able to enjoy it again, White Fox said softly. Chu Pinger, who was at the entrance of the cave, murmured, Dream of Mandarin Ducks and Butterflies. What a beautiful name. Xianxia walked back and forth with his hands behind his back. He gathered his emotions and sighed. His voice was slightly hoarse as he sang. Yesterday was like the flowing water in the east, far away from me and cannot stay. Today my heart is in chaos and worries me. Draw a knife to cut the water and it flows even more. Drink a cup to drown your worries even more. The cool breeze of the Ming dynasty drifts everywhere. Only the new laugh who hears the old cry. The word love is so hard. Should I ask clearly or should I pretend not to know? It's hard to be content with knowing more and knowing less. It seems to be an era of mandarin ducks and butterflies, but who can escape the sorrows of the human world? In the world of flowers and flowers, mandarin ducks and butterflies are already crazy in the human world. Why bother to ascend to the blue sky? Why not sleep together gently? At the end of the song, White Fox was already standing there in a daze. Chu Pinger, who was at the entrance of the cave, looked at the ugly perverted thief in disbelief and murmured, "His voice is so moving. A person who can make such a good song must have a good character. Could it be that I really wronged him last time? Sister White, what do you think of my song? Is it acceptable?" Yu Qianchou asked with a little uncertainty. White Fox's eyes looked ahead in a daze and nodded. Her slender fingers stroked the strings of the zither and her red lips moved slightly. The sound of the zither accompanied by the song flowed out slowly like a river of autumn water, stirring people's hearts. The listeners also sighed sadly. Chu Pinger listened to it a few times and secretly memorized the song. Then she quietly returned. Yu Qianchou could not help but sigh at White Fox's musical talent. She could compose a song casually and make it sound interesting. Looking at her red lips, he could not help but think of the golden elixir that she gave him. Listening to the new song, he sat down cross-legged. In his mind, the golden bead that was revolving in a certain orbit in his dantian appeared. Yu Qianchou concentrated and observed it, hoping to find something. The golden bead's surface was smooth and round. After observing it for a long time, he did not find anything special. A strand of divine sense locked onto the revolving golden bead, wanting to investigate its internal structure. Yu Qianchou's body trembled and he, who was sitting in front of the pavilion, suddenly disappeared. In the pavilion, White Fox stopped playing and singing. Her beautiful eyes stared at the place where Yu Qianchou was sitting. She frowned slightly and spread out a powerful divine sense to search everywhere. Within a radius of a few hundred meters, there was no trace of anyone. She softly exclaimed in surprise. She did not expect that with her current cultivation, there was actually someone who could slip away under her eyes. In an open space with a radius of a few hundred meters, Yu Qianchou was alone and looked around in astonishment. The open space was desolate and there was no sign of life. At the end of the open space, the surroundings were immersed in purple chaos. "Where is this? Why did I come here?" Yu Qianchou muttered and shouted, "Is there anyone here? Is there anyone here?" The surroundings were dead silent, there was no sound at all. He ran to the edge of the chaos at the end of the open space and wanted to rush over to see what was there. However, no matter how much effort he put in, he could not go over it. After tossing and turning in the desolate open space for half a day, Yu Qianchou was so tired that he was gasping for breath. He laid on the ground and thought about what was going on. In his mind, he thought about the revolving golden bead in his dantian. At that time, he released a strand of divine sense to investigate, and then this happened. Could this be the world inside the golden bead? Thinking about this, Yu Qianchou suddenly jumped up and sank his mind into his dantian to search for the golden bead. His dantian was empty except for his innate qi. The golden bead had disappeared. He said in surprise, "Could this really be inside the golden bead?" Clenching his teeth, he tried to release his divine sense out of his body. He would not know if he did not try, but when he tried, he was shocked. With his cultivation level, his divine sense could only go 1 or 2 meters outside his body. However, in this place, it could extend infinitely and only stopped when it reached the edge of the chaos. Yu Qianchou was shocked. This distance was something that only people with a core formation cultivation level could do. After he retracted his divine sense, he suddenly felt that this open space with a circumference of a few hundred meters seemed to be connected to his heart. It was as if he could know where and what was in this place. "Behind that small slope there is a black stone," Yu Qianchou muttered. He ran over to take a look. Sure enough. He tried a few more times and everything worked. He was having a lot of fun playing around. One time he had a sudden thought, "I want to go there." When he realized that the terrain around him had changed, he was shocked. After trying a few more times, he realized that he could actually move freely in this place. In other words, he could go wherever he wanted. It was just a matter of thinking. Gradually, Yu Qianchou realized that in this small space, he had a feeling that he was in control of the whole situation. For some unknown reason, this space, which was originally as bright as day, gradually darkened. Xianxia stood there alone. He felt like he was going crazy. He could not help but shout hysterically, "I want light, I want light." At this moment he realized that he was not the god of creation here. He could get whatever he wanted. Am I going to be imprisoned here for the rest of my life? But there is nothing to eat here. Am I going to starve to death? Boo. Xianxia's heart was filled with endless sorrow. He sat on the ground and wailed. Tears flowed down his face as he cried, "I don't want to die. Someone save me. I want to go back. Brother Zhou, what happened to you?" The white fox's gentle voice entered his ears. Xianxia's body shook. He wiped away his tears and his eyes lit up. He was sitting in a stone cave. The latter jumped up high and laughed maniacally. "I'm finally out. You almost scared me to death. Hee. The white fox looked at the lively Xianxia, who was about to lose his mind. She frowned and asked, "Brother Zhou, why did you suddenly disappear and reappear? What are you doing?" Big sister is confused. Hearing the white fox's words, Xianxia finally woke up from his crazy state. He waved his hand and smiled. Don't worry. I haven't figured it out yet. When I figure it out, I'll tell Big Sister White first. I'm going to confirm something now." Under the former's astonished gaze, the latter ran out of the cave. Hee. I was right. It's already dark outside. Xianxia laughed proudly. In the blink of an eye, a few days passed. These days the white fox was not in the mood to play the zither and sing because of the madman Xianxia. He ran in and out of the cave from day to night. He was extremely busy. If he wasn't hugging a bunch of flowers and grass, he would capture some birds and beasts. He would run to the pavilion and suddenly disappear. He would appear again for a long time or a short time. His mouth was smiling so widely that he never closed it. The white fox could not help but ask him what he was doing a few times. He always said that he was not in a hurry. One day she saw him disappear in front of the pavilion. Half a day later she suddenly saw him holding a fragrant and piping hot chicken leg in his hand. He was chewing on it until his mouth was covered in oil. The white fox could not help but ask again, "Brother Zhou, what's going on?" Chapter 14. Xianxia chuckled. He tore off a piece of meat and chewed it in his mouth. Just as he swallowed, his face froze as if he was choking. He patted his chest and a pot of wine appeared in his other hand. He gulped down a few mouthfuls and finally let out a burp. He smiled and told the white fox about the golden bead. The latter was dumbfounded. She never thought that the golden bead could be used in such a way. The former said mockingly, "Sister White, aren't you tired of staying in this dark place? Do you want to come to my territory? It's much quieter there and no one will disturb you." The white fox looked at Xianxia non-committally and said softly, "Brother Zhou, didn't you say that you want to make a name for yourself in the cultivation world? I see that you haven't cultivated at all these days." After saying that, she continued to play the zither and sing softly. Playing with things can distract one's ambition. Xianxia thought about how he had spent the past few days playing with things and felt a little ashamed. He threw away the pheasant leg in his hand. Pa! Fell into the pool and sank. The white fox who was playing the zither frowned slightly. Sitting down cross-legged, Xianxia took out 2 spirit stones. He closed his eyes and activated the mysterious heaven skill. He slowly absorbed the spiritual energy and converted it into vital energy to be stored in his body. He threw the waste rock into the water and 2 more spirit stones appeared in his hands. When he converted the spiritual energy inside them into vital energy, he found that his body was filled with vital energy. His dantian could no longer contain it. Xianxia was shocked. These spirit stones were really good stuff. He had only absorbed 6 mid-grade spirit stones, and the converted vital energy was enough for him to cultivate to the 5th level. If he absorbed spiritual energy from the air, how many years would it take to compare to 6 mid-grade spirit stones? Without hesitation, he memorized the 5th level of the mysterious heaven skill and began to cultivate. It was actually very easy to cultivate from the 5th to the 10th level of the Qi refinement realm. In fact, it was not as difficult as opening the 8 extraordinary meridians from the 1st to the 4th level. As long as one absorbed enough spiritual energy, it was basically not a big problem. After a few days, when Xianxia refined the last bit of true qi in his body into his dantian, his entire body trembled. He could feel that every cell in his body had undergone a qualitative change. He thought to himself, I've finally reached level 5. Checking the changes in his dantian, he found that his dantian, which used to be filled with true energy, had become empty, with only a few wisps of true energy floating around. However, the previous white true energy was incomparable to this tangible true energy. With a thought, he directed a strand of Xianxia from his dantian into his body. As soon as this strand left his dantian, it turned into countless strands of Xianxia, filling his entire body with explosive power. He activated the mysterious heaven method's corresponding offensive art. Xianxia opened his eyes abruptly and slammed his palm into the pool. Bang! A loud sound echoed in the stone room, and a splash of water exploded a few meters high before falling back down. The sound of the zither behind him stopped abruptly. Xianxia stopped cultivating and turned around to look. His smiling face froze. The white fox was staring at him with her beautiful eyes, obviously blaming him for disturbing her playing the zither. He quickly got up and begged for mercy. The white fox rolled her eyes at him and was too lazy to argue with him. She continued to play the zither and sang, "Yesterday was like the east flowing water, far away from me, not staying." Xianxia's teeth ached from listening to the song. He turned around and sat down with his back facing the white fox. 2 spirit stones appeared in his hands and he slowly closed his eyes. Yes. The tangible true energy in my dantian has almost reached 1/3. Xianxia, who was sitting cross-legged in front of the pavilion, suddenly jumped up and screamed, F***CK. Where are my spirit stones? Who stole my spirit stones? The white fox was startled by him and could not continue playing anymore. She opened her red lips and was about to scold him, but Xianxia's figure suddenly disappeared. The white fox was slightly annoyed, and her slender fingers stroked the strings of the zither. A homophonic sound rang in the cave. Spirit stones, where did my spirit stones go? A sika deer was lying on the grass sleeping. Suddenly, a figure appeared out of nowhere and squawked, scaring the deer into running away. Xianxia returned to the world inside the golden bead. At this moment, the place was already filled with flowers and plants. 2 colorful pheasants, one male and one female, were talking about love. They were also startled by him and flew away. He did not care so much. He found the cloth bag given by his master and rummaged for a while. Then he seemed to have thought of something. He slapped his forehead and sat on the ground crying, "Ah, the spirit stones are used up so quickly. This is really terrible." One had to know that spirit stones were not that easy to obtain. Within Ong Kwangsung's sphere of influence, there were a few spirit stone mines. Every month, the spirit stones mined were distributed by the sect. Seniors living in seclusion in the back mountain could receive 2 high-grade spirit stones every month. Sect leader could receive 1 high-grade spirit stone. Elders could receive 50 mid-grade spirit stones. Core formation disciples could receive 25 mid-grade spirit stones. Foundation building disciples could receive 10 mid-grade spirit stones and 250 low-grade spirit stones. Also, disciples who were Qi refining level 4 and above could receive 500 low-grade spirit stones every month. The amount of spirit stones mined by Ong Kwangsung every month was not a small amount in the cultivation world. However, there were more than 1,000 people. It was impossible to let everyone have their fill. They could only strictly distribute the spirit stones according to their rank. Because this involved everyone's interests, even the sect leader did not dare to be biased. Otherwise, not only would he lose his position as the sect leader, he might even be beaten to death. Of course, only half of the spirit stones mined every month were distributed. The other half was the sect's public property. Naturally, this was to buy and sell some necessities. Or if a disciple of the sect made some contributions, it could also be used as a reward. Xianxia had already reached Qi refining level 4 and above. He could receive 500 low-grade spirit stones every month. This was to hide some things. He did not report it and did not go through the sect's assessment. If he did not report it, he would not receive his salary. In fact, Xianxia's 50 mid-grade spirit stones every month were not enough. The dozen or so that Xianxia used were taken out from his mouth. AI. Without spirit stones, how can I continue to cultivate? Even if I could get 500 low-grade spirit stones every month, it would only be equivalent to 5 mid-grade spirit stones. Currently, 1/3 of the Qi in my dantian was used up to 10 mid-grade spirit stones. If I want to cultivate to Qi refining level 6, I need another 20 mid-grade spirit stones, which is equivalent to 2,000 low-grade spirit stones. I would need 4 months of low-grade spirit stones to cultivate to Qi refining level 6. If I want to cultivate to Qi refining level 10, how many spirit stones would I need? Yu Qianchou was a little dispirited. He had used 6 middle-grade spirit stones to advance to the 5th level of the Qi refining stage. In the end, from the 5th level to the 6th level he had used nearly 10 middle-grade spirit stones. The Zhen Qi in his Dantian was not even a third of the original amount. The amount of Zhen Qi needed to advance to the next level was clearly increasing exponentially. If he cultivated to the late stage of tribulation passing stage he would need a mountain of spirit stones. Yu Qianchou was really worried. He was like his name. Without the surname he was called Qianchou. If he had never used spirit stones before it would have been fine. But now that he had, how could he still foolishly absorb the heaven and earth spiritual Qi like before? If he wanted to rely on it to increase his cultivation he was afraid that even if he had the patience he would not have that long of a life. There was another thing that he did not know. The volume of his Dantian was 3 times that of an average person. In other words, if an average person used 2 days to cultivate their Dantian, it would be equivalent to him using 6 days. In fact, an average person only needed a third of the amount of spirit stones he used to cultivate their Dantian. Master Xianxia did not understand. The spirit stones he gave him were based on 1 month minus the time needed to cultivate his Dantian by 4 levels. In other words, the stones that Xianxia gave him were prepared for his disciple to cultivate his Dantian by 1 level. There is no other way. I can only wait for Master to come back and think of a way. Yu Qianchou dejectedly stood up. In the distance pheasants were cooing. From the sound they were probably laying eggs. This was exactly what Yu Qianchou wanted when he caught them. He deliberately caught a male and a female, hoping that they could lay more eggs and hatch more pheasants. That way he could eat roasted pheasants anytime. However, he was not in the mood to do so now. He lazily raised his head and looked at it. Then he lowered his head again. What? He raised his head again and cried out in surprise. Looking around, his territory had doubled from its original base. Now it probably had a radius of nearly a kilometer. Yu Qianchou closed his eyes. Although it had grown bigger, it was still under his control. Yes. There were 9 eggs in the pheasant's nest. It did not take long for him to understand the reason. This golden pearl had already become one with him. If he did not guess wrong, when his cultivation increased by 1 level, the territory here would double from its original base. Seeing this happy thing, the worry of not having spirit stones lessened a lot. He wandered around his own territory and returned to the pavilion. With regards to his sudden appearance and disappearance, the white fox was already used to it. She raised her head and looked at him. She stopped playing the zither and asked softly, 1 month's time is up. Are you going back? Yes, I'm going back. It has already been a few days. I think Master should be back by now. After saying that, he turned around and waved his hand. Sister Bai, I will come to see you often. The reply he got was, Mandarin duck butterfly dream. He returned to the courtyard and walked around. Strangely, he found that Master had not returned. If he had returned, the ground would not be so clean. He pulled over a bamboo chair and wiped it. There was no dust. He had to admit that the air quality now was not a bit better than in his previous life. In his previous life, if the room was not cleaned for a few days, the dust would be thicker than it was now after a month. He turned around and lay down. Why are there so many people running in the direction of Green Light Hall? Yu Qianchou, who was pretending to be asleep, woke up and sat up slightly. With his current cultivation, it was not a problem for him to hear a nearby jog. He paused, closed his eyes and lay down. Anyway, it's none of my business if something happens. Not long after he lay down, he suddenly heard someone outside the courtyard shouting, Is Marshal Uncle Yu in? After shouting twice, Yu Qianchou responded. He felt strange that someone was looking for him. When he walked out of the courtyard, an unfamiliar disciple bowed and said, Marshal Uncle Yu, Sect Master wants you to go to Green Light Hall quickly. Sect Master wants me to go to Green Light Hall? What's the matter? Yu Qianchou asked curiously. It was true. No one had ever looked for him, not to mention the sect master who had led him to Ongquangsung. The disciple's expression was perturbed, as if there was something he could not say. After a moment of silence, he finally stamped his feet and said respectfully, Elder Hao led a team to the New Excellence Assembly. On the way back he accidentally found a spiritual herb. However, because the Luo sect interfered, the two sides had a dispute. In the end, a few elders were injured, and because Elder Hao's injury was too serious. Hearing this, Yu Qianchou's expression changed. He was no longer in the mood to listen and ran towards Green Light Hall like a wisp of smoke. Chapter 15. There was a group of people whispering in the plaza in front of the Green Light Hall. In the crowd there were 10 disciples wrapped in bandages, obviously injured. Yu Qianchou ran into the crowd, and when the crowd saw him they all opened up a path. A few injured elders were sitting cross-legged on the ground, and behind them there were people treating their injuries. In the middle a person was lying, his body covered with a white cloth. Yu Qianchou, who rushed into the crowd, calmed down at this moment. His gaze coldly swept across the injured elders, and his master was not among them. His gaze fell on the white cloth and his face twitched as he slowly walked over. In an instant, the plaza became incomparably quiet, and a few hundred pairs of eyes silently followed his footsteps. Yu Qianchou squatted down, and the hand that stretched towards the white cloth trembled uncontrollably. The knuckles that pinched the corner of the white cloth were abnormally pale, and as if he was carrying a heavy object he slowly lifted it up. The sloppy old man's familiar face entered his eyes as the white cloth was lifted up. The past was still vivid in his mind, but the amiable old man was no longer breathing. Your cultivation speed is godly. This time's new talent assembly, I want to rely on sect leader Xixiang to help out, so tomorrow I will lead a team with a few other Xixiang. When the time comes when the foundation building pills are distributed, you have the nerve to ask for 1 or 2 to prepare for your foundation building. Master's words when they parted seemed to be right next to his ears. Looking at the old man's deathly pale face, and that smear of dried blood at the corner of his mouth, Yu Qianchou's heart was bleeding. If it wasn't for him, Master definitely wouldn't participate in some bullshit new talent assembly, and also wouldn't. The squatting Yu Qianchou had already unknowingly knelt down. His trembling hands carefully covered the white cloth, as if he was afraid of disturbing the sleeping old man. He suddenly opened up his arms, clenched his fists and raised his head to the sky, shouting soundlessly without making a single sound. His white teeth looked abnormally eerie under the sunlight and the veins on his neck popped out. Suddenly, under the gaze of the crowd, the kneeling Yu Qianchou actually spat out a mouthful of blood. The few elders who were treating the injured turned their heads in unison when they heard the voice. Their eyes were filled with surprise. Some of the female disciples couldn't help but cry out in surprise. They'd never imagined that there would actually be such a deep relationship between master and disciple in the cultivation world that was cold and emotionless. Everyone sighed endlessly when they thought about how Ong Guangtsung's trash life wouldn't be any better if he left the protection of his master. Chu Ping'er, who was standing in the crowd, could no longer associate the peeping Tom with Yu Qianchou, who was vomiting blood in front of her. Recalling that the 2 peerless songs came from this person, she could not help but tear up, her eyes filled with pity. The sect leader is here, someone shouted. Sect Master Lu Chongqing walked out of the Cyan Light Palace, and the group of elders who walked out behind him all had ashen faces. Lu Chongqing stood in front of Yu Qianchou and stopped. His eyes swept over the blood on the ground and looked at the blood stain at the corner of Yu Qianchou's mouth. He sighed and said, "Since it has already happened, martial nephew, please restrain your grief." Yu Qianchou, who was kneeling there, didn't even raise his eyelids when he heard the voice. He just said in a frighteningly calm voice, "I just want to know what's going on." Everyone was slightly shocked. They didn't expect that he didn't even have the slightest bit of respect in front of the sect leader. You're a trash without the protection of your master. Do you still want to mingle in Ong Guangtsung in the future? A handsome young man walked out of the crowd and walked toward Yu Qianchou with a face full of anger. Lu Chongqing looked at the kneeling man and frowned slightly. He then stopped the handsome young man with his eyes. Those who knew the young man knew that he was the sect leader's grandson, the outstanding talent among his peers, Lu Zhenguang. His appearance caused many female disciples to have a strange look in their eyes. They looked at him with affection. Chu Ping'er was the same. Sect leader Lu Chongqing said to an old man beside him in a deep voice, "Junior martial brother. I'll let you tell everyone what happened." The old man nodded and told the story with a livid face. It turned out that Ong Kwang-tsung found a spirit herb on his way back from the new talent assembly. It was called the seven-color lingji. What was the seven-color lingji? It was a spirit herb of the heavens and earth. It was a treasure that cultivators dreamed of. If it could be used in a pill to help cultivators advance, it would almost certainly help them advance. How could a cultivator not regard such a thing as a treasure? And the one who found it was Yu Qianchou's master, Zhou Xian. Just when Ong Kwang-tsung was celebrating, he bumped into the Deluo sect who came later. The cultivation world was a place where the strong preyed on the weak. When they saw such a treasure, the Deluo sect immediately said that they were the first to find it. The two sides immediately clashed. The Deluo sect was ranked second in the cultivation world of the Wuxia Empire. Ong Kwang-tsung was barely ranked sixth. Naturally, the latter was no match for the former. Zhou Xian, who had the spirit herb, was the first to bear the brunt. In the end, not only were the elders of Ong Kwang-tsung injured, some of the participating disciples were also injured. Zhou Xian, who was eager to protect the spirit herb, was seriously injured by the elders of Deluo sect. In the end, the spirit herb was snatched by the Deluo sect. Zhou Xian died before he could return to Ong Kwang-tsung. After hearing this, the disciples of Ong Kwang-tsung in front of the hall were in an uproar. They all condemned the Deluo sect. Yu Qianchou's face was so cold that it could freeze. Sect leader Lu Chongqing's eyes swept across the crowd and said in a deep voice, "It's a pity that I, Ong Kwang-tsung, am not as strong as the Deluo sect. This matter has been reported to the seniors in seclusion at the back of the mountain. Their intention is to look at the bigger picture and ask us to endure the humiliation and not be impulsive. This matter will be handed over to the abbot of the Cultivation Alliance to uphold justice." The disciples who had been quiet were in an uproar again. Everyone knew that the Cultivation Alliance was just a puppet. They would only speak up for the stronger side. If they were to handle this matter, there would be no justice to speak of. The voices grew louder and louder. Lu Chongqing frowned and snorted. His cold eyes swept across the crowd, and the front of the hall suddenly became silent. Suddenly, a cold laugh rang out. Everyone looked over in shock. Hee. Deluo sect. Yu Qianchou, who was kneeling on the ground, stood up and stared straight at Lu Chongqing. Without any respect, he asked, "Is this the decision of the sect?" Not only Lu Chongqing but the faces of the elders also changed. The Ong Kwang-tsung disciples all took a deep breath. They thought to themselves that this trash had the guts to speak to the sect leader like this. He really didn't want to live anymore. Chu Pinger's face was also filled with worry. How dare you? How dare you be disrespectful to the sect leader? Lu Jingguang, who was at the side, took a few steps forward and slashed at Yu Qianchou with his palm. None of the sect leader Lu Chongqing and the elders in front of the hall tried to stop him. Humph. Yu Qianchou snorted coldly. He raised his mysterious heaven skill to the extreme and met the attack with his palm. Everyone was shocked. This trash actually dared to fight with Lu Jingguang. As for the famous Ong Kwang-tsung Lu Jingguang, Yu Qianchou also knew him. However, he was not the kind of person who would not fight back when he was beaten. Moreover, his master was already dead. How could he care so much? Bang! The two palms collided with a loud sound. Both of them were pushed back at the same time. However, Yu Qianchou was pushed back a few more steps. Silence. Absolute silence. Not only the Ong Kwang-tsung disciples, the sect leader and the elders were all dumbfounded. Even Lu Jingguang, who attacked, looked at his own palm in disbelief. This trash actually hid his strength so deeply. Anyone could see that the person who attacked just now was not an ordinary person. At the very least, he was a Qi training level 4 cultivator. All the disciples' mouths were wide open. The sect leader and the elders were stunned. Even with their cultivation, they couldn't see that Yu Qianchou had already stepped into the door of cultivation. How could this be? How could someone without the foundation of cultivation be able to step into the door of cultivation? This was an unchanging rule since ancient times. Today it was actually broken. In an instant, some of the elders' faces became fiery. One must know that many of them had families in the secular world. Unfortunately, without the foundation of cultivation, they died of old age. In front of them was a chance to solve this mystery. That palm just now, Yu Qianchou actually had a bit of an advantage. His Qi training level 5 could almost match a Qi training level 6 cultivator. Moreover, he used his full strength. And Lu Jingguang only wanted to casually teach him a lesson. He never thought of injuring him. After all, this was in front of everyone. Otherwise, with Yu Qianchou's Qi training level 5 cultivation, how could he push back Lu Xingguang, who was in the middle stage of foundation establishment, with one palm? This was the same logic as an adult who wasn't prepared to stand still. He could also be pushed back by a child. Yu Qianchou's palm was not easy to take. The blood in his body was churning. After a long time he finally calmed down. He stared at Lu Xingguang and sneered, "You, a 10th generation disciple, actually dared to attack martial uncle. Hehe. You really have guts. Could it be that just because your grandfather is the sect leader, you don't put on Guangxung's rules in your eyes? I want to see if this sect rule is set by your family. I want to see if Ong Guangxung is opened by your family. I want to see how Ong Guangxung will deal with you." No one could take such a big hat being put on them. Lu Xingguang's face instantly turned pale after hearing the 3 consecutive, "I want to see." Everyone looked at sect leader Lu Zhangqing. The latter's face was gloomy. His eyes suddenly emitted 2 rays of light as he stared at Yu Qianchou. He then stared at Lu Xingguang and shouted, "Kneel." Plop. His grandson obediently knelt in front of his grandfather. The latter's chest rose and fell obviously. At this time an elder stood up and said, "Since this is Xingguang's first offense and it was done in a moment of desperation to protect the sect leader's prestige, it was purely an unintentional act. I hope sect leader will be lenient." "Sect master, please be lenient with your punishment." Another few elders pleaded together. Lu Chongqing's face finally calmed down. He stared at his grandson and said in a deep voice, "According to the sect rules, your cultivation should be abolished and you should be kicked out of the sect. But for the sake of the elders, you will be fined 10 years' worth of spiritual stones and be punished to copy the sect rules 10,000 times. Do you accept this?" Lu Xingguang did not dare to have any other opinions. If his cultivation was really abolished and he was kicked out of the sect, it would really be worse than death. He quickly kowtowed and said, "I am willing to accept the punishment." Sect leader Lu Chongqing nodded and said to Yu Qianchou meaningfully, "According to the sect rules, you should be punished for looking down on your elders. Martial nephew, do you think it is fair for me to deal with it like this?" His words were clearly telling Yu Qianchou that he was also suspected of being disrespectful to the sect leader just now. He did not punish him, so he should stop holding on to his grandson. Hehe. Yu Qianchou sneered noncommittally. He turned around and carried his master's body, then strode away. The crowd made a path. Lu Xingguang looked at Yu Qianchou's back with resentment. The crowd secretly shook their heads and sighed in their hearts. Yu Qianchou had really offended the Lu family today. He would have a good time in the future. What they did not know was that Yu Qianchou had already planned to go all out. He was prepared to hide in the golden bead if he could not win. "You can bite me." Chapter 16. The Forbidden Area, the Stone Cave and the Stone Bridge. In the cave there was no longer the incessant playing and singing day and night. The peerless white fox walked out of the zither platform, looked at the dead and alive in front of the pavilion and faintly sighed. After learning about Yu Qianchou's master's experience, she thought about it and asked Yu Qianchou if he wanted her to go to the Daoyuo sect. The latter knew that with the white fox's strength, killing a few people would be as easy as chopping vegetables. In order to avenge him, the white fox was prepared to leave the forbidden area that had trapped her for more than 200 years. Yu Qianchou thanked her for this. However, he refused without hesitation. His words made the white fox's hair stand on end. A master for a day, a father for life. It was only right that the son would avenge his father. "I want the Daoyuo sect to be buried with my master." The beautiful woman did not say anything else. Although she had killed hundreds of people in a rage, it was only because she was angry. There were probably thousands of cultivators in the entire Daoyuo sect. She couldn't bring herself to kill all of them, not even sparing a chicken or a dog. The Daoyuo sect had been in the cultivation world for thousands of years. There were many hidden dragons and crouching tigers. He could not kill them with just a word. It seemed that Yu Qianchou had to do it himself. Seeing that her brother did not say it casually, the white fox looked worried. Yu Qianchou had a sad smile on his face as he wiped the blood off his master's face with a wet cloth. When he changed his master's clothes, he saw the holes on his master's body. The muscles on his face twitched. He clenched his fists and roared, "Daoyuo sect." His voice echoed in the cave for a long time. After Xianxi's body was reborn, Yu Qianchou picked it up and was about to enter the golden bead when the white fox said, "Brother Chou, wait." Yu Qianchou was stunned and looked at her in confusion. She picked up her zither and slowly walked out of the pavilion. Immediately, a purple light screen appeared to block her. The white fox sighed and said, "If I couldn't do anything to you 200 years ago, do you think you can stop me now?" After she finished speaking, she opened her red lips and blew a breath of air towards the purple light curtain. The purple light curtain rippled and a hole appeared in the middle. The white fox slowly walked out from the hole and the purple light curtain closed behind her and disappeared. "Oh my god. He actually came out." Yu Qianchou was stunned. "Sister Bai. What are you doing? Didn't Brother Chou invite me to live in your so-called territory? Why are you regretting it now?" White Fox smiled sweetly. "Oh my god." He actually smiled. The legendary smile that could topple a city or a country was probably referring to a woman like her. Yu Qianchou smiled bitterly. "Since Jeju is willing to come, little brother is more than happy to come. How can I go back on my words? Sister, hold my hand." After he finished speaking, he freed one hand. White Fox didn't mind that he had hugged a dead person and gently held it with her slender hand. Feeling the softness in his hand, Yu Qianchou's mind was slightly shaken, but he didn't have any dirty thoughts today. He immediately focused his mind on the golden bead. In an instant, the figure in front of the pavilion disappeared. In the green light hall, the sect leader was discussing matters with the elders. Suddenly, a small bell hanging at the side of the hall rang. Everyone turned their heads to look. Sect leader Lu Chongqing said curiously, "Did the white fox spirit from the forbidden area come out? Let's go and take a look." After he finished speaking, he flew out of the hall and the figures behind him followed. A group of people came to the grotto and saw that the pavilion was empty. They looked at each other in dismay. Sect leader Xiang. "If I remember correctly, there is a purple light demon trapping formation here. Those who are trapped in the pavilion can't come out unless they have reached the middle stage of the tribulation passing stage. Could it be that this white fox spirit has reached the middle stage of the tribulation passing stage? That's impossible. If she really has reached the middle stage of the tribulation passing stage, there should be a lot of commotion when she goes through the heavenly tribulations in the early and middle stages. How could we not know?" A skinny old man walked to the side of the silent Lu Chongqing and said. This old man was the elder who first pleaded for Lu Zhenguang. His name was Wu Baoru. Lu Chongqing silently shook his head, indicating that he also didn't know. Of course, they didn't know the reason. What cultivators did was to go against the heavens and change their fate. Forcibly increasing one's cultivation level was also against the heavens. When one's cultivation level reached a certain level, he would naturally be punished by the heavens. This was the origin of the tribulation passing stage. However, after the white fox reached the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, she stopped cultivating. Naturally, there was no heaven-defying action to forcibly increase her cultivation level. Naturally, the punishment from the heavens couldn't be found on her. She had unknowingly reached the late stage of the tribulation passing stage because of the golden bead. In fact, the white fox also felt that it was strange. Why didn't her cultivation level reach the late stage of the tribulation passing stage? It seems that we have to report this matter to the master who is cultivating in the back of the mountain. Lu Chongqing sighed. We still have to disturb the master? Wu Baoru was slightly surprised. He frowned and said, didn't the master say that the white fox would be released after being trapped for 100 years? She didn't want to come out before, so we can't be blamed. Now that she has come out on her own, it saves us the trouble. Senior Marshal Brother, why do you still want to disturb the master? The master is now at the critical moment of breaking through the early stage of the tribulation passing stage. We have just disturbed him because of the matter of the Daoyuo sect. If we go now, I'm afraid it's not appropriate, right? Lu Chongqing made a hand seal and flicked 4 white lights at the 4 pillars of the pavilion. Purple lightning swam on the pillars and 4 spirit talismans appeared. Lu Chongqing made another hand seal and shouted, withdraw. The 4 spirit talismans turned into 4 purple lights and shot into Lu Chongqing's sleeve. After doing this, he turned around and looked at the others. He shook his head and said, Junior Marshal Brother, you only know one thing but not the other. The white fox spirit killed recklessly in the secular world and should be punished. However, the master imprisoned her for no other reason than that the white fox would be able to break through to the late stage of the nascent soul realm in less than 100 years. So the master made an agreement with the white fox. If the white fox wanted to come out after 100 years, she would have to swear an oath to join the Ong Kwang Tsung. Otherwise she would be imprisoned until she agreed. Plus, the master did this so that the Ong Kwang Tsung would have one more good helper. I didn't expect that now. The elders looked at each other. It seemed that they didn't know the reason behind it and were all fooled by the rumor that everyone knew. Wu Baoru sighed and said, the master really put in a lot of effort for Ong Kwang Tsung. He even planned for 100 years. Lu Chongqing nodded. Suddenly he seemed to remember something. He frowned and said to Wu Baoru, there is something that I need Junior Martial Brother to think about. Junior Martial Brother Hao's disciple Yu Qianchou can actually cultivate without a root bone. It is really incredible. This matter has to be cleared up, so I will have to trouble Junior Martial Brother. Junior Martial Brother, remember, you must clear up this matter. The last sentence was said in a gloomy tone. The meaning behind it was worth thinking about. Yes. Junior Martial Brother, you must clear up this matter. Senior Martial Brother, we will leave it to you. When the others heard it was about this matter, they all agreed. Wu Baoru laughed and said, I understand. I will not disappoint the sect leader and the other senior and junior martial brothers. Something that could make a group of people so concerned was naturally related to their own interests. If the doubts about what happened to Yu Qianchou were cleared up, these children without a root bone at the foot of the mountain could openly join the Ong Kwang Tsung to cultivate. This was something that everyone hoped for. The white fox, who was hugging the zither, looked at the space with a radius of nearly 1,000 meters in surprise. Although she had heard about it from Yu Qianchou, she could not help but be surprised when she saw it for the first time. She didn't expect that this small golden bead could actually contain such a large space. It was similar to the storage pouch used by cultivators, but obviously a storage pouch couldn't contain such a large space. It was also impossible to plant flowers and grass inside like Yu Qianchou, and even raise some small animals inside. According to Yu Qianchou, there was also a division between day and night here. If it was not for the purple chaos surrounding it, it would not be any different from the outside world. The white fox bent down to pluck a wild flower. She pinched it with her slender fingers and put it under her nose. She sniffed the fragrance that she had not smelled for a long time. She listened to the chirping of birds. She could not help but reveal a sweet smile on her face. She looked around with her beautiful eyes. It was obvious that she liked this place very much. Suddenly she heard a tinkling sound. She turned around and saw Yu Qianchou hugging a sword and busying himself around a huge exposed rock. She walked over with light steps and asked, Brother Chou, what are you doing? Making a stone coffin for master. As she said that, she chopped the rock with her sword. The white fox frowned slightly. She stretched out her hand and said, Give me the sword. Yu Qianchou was stunned. He gave the sword to the white fox in confusion. The white fox's graceful figure unfolded. Her white clothes fluttered. She threw her zither and stood in the distance. Then she stabbed her sword into the bottom of the huge rock and gently flicked it. The huge rock, which had a diameter of nearly 3 meters, flew up and was flicked into the air by her sword. Seeing how effortlessly she did it, the white fox was dumbfounded. The long sword twirled. Shio, shio. Numerous sword rays shot towards the huge rock that was tumbling in the air. It was like a knife cutting through tofu. There was almost no sound. Seeing a black shadow fall, the white fox gently stretched out her sword and held up the stone pillar that had become smooth on all 6 sides. She slowly placed it on the ground. She pulled out her sword. Her white sleeves flashed with a ray of light. The stone pillar flew up and a thick stone slab fell to the ground. If he could not see what the white fox was going to do, Yu Qianchou might as well bang his head against the wall and die. This vixen sister obviously saw that he was working too hard, so she did it for him. Stop. Hearing the voice, the white fox was stunned. Yu Qianchou came over and snatched the sword from her hand. He shook his head and said, Thank you, sister, for your kindness. As a disciple, it's better for me, master's stone coffin, to do it myself. He then climbed onto the stone pillar and started digging. The white fox frowned. She knew that he wanted to show his filial piety. However, with his cultivation level, he would not be able to dig if he was gentle. If he was too heavy, he was afraid that he would damage it. With his current speed, he did not know how long it would take for him to dig the stone pillar into a stone coffin. The white fox looked helpless. She reached into the sachet at her waist and took out a pair of black gloves. She said, "Catch." Xianxia swung his hand and grabbed it. He asked in confusion, "What are you doing?" The white fox said helplessly, "My fox clan likes to live in caves. This is a magic treasure passed down by my clan's ancestors. It's called Mountain Piercing Claw. When you wear it, you can pierce through mountains and dig holes. Even the hardest rock can't stop you. There's another advantage to wearing it. It's that you can sense the amount of spiritual energy in the surroundings. That's why my clan's ancestors used it to find places with dense spiritual energy to dig holes to live in. You can use it after you put it on and inject your vital energy into it." Chapter 17. Oh. Xianxia immediately threw the sword away and put on the mountain-piercing claw. His 10 fingers were covered with 10 black and shiny claws. He waved his hands a few times and it looked very powerful. However, he felt that it didn't fit well and was a little loose. Following the white fox's instructions, he infused his vital energy into the gloves. He felt his hands tighten as if the gloves had become one with his palms. He retracted his vital energy and the gloves loosened from his palms. "This is good. Let me try." Xianxia praised. He raised a finger and poked it into the rock. The finger sank into the base of the finger without any effort. He tried a few more times and it was the same. He turned his head and waved his claws. "Thank you, sister, for giving me this treasure." The white fox shook her head. "I didn't say I was giving it to you. This is the heritage treasure of my fox clan. I don't have the right to give it to you. I'm just lending it to you for a while." Xianxia was stunned. He smiled. "I understand." He then buried his head in work. His claws danced and stone chips flew everywhere. In less than half a day, he successfully made a stone coffin that looked passable. He took off his gloves and hung them on his waist. He found a place that he thought was a good place for feng shui. He struck with his palms a few hundred times and finally made a deep hole. After that, the stone coffin that had been hollowed out and could be moved with his cultivation was placed into the pit. Then he carefully placed his master's body inside. After covering it with the stone lid, the surrounding soil was used to make a bun. His master was naturally the filling of the bun. He looked left and right and circled around a few times. He kept feeling that something was missing. Finally, he slapped his forehead. Turned out to be a tombstone. He then put on his gloves and made another tombstone. On top of the tombstone he wrote, "Grave of my master Xianxia." On the side he wrote, "Erected by my unfilial disciple Xianxia." After he was done, he took a closer look. Other than the writing being a little ugly, there shouldn't be any other mistakes. When he carried the tombstone to the bun, he was dumbfounded. He walked around the grave a few times and was so anxious that his forehead was sweating. It turned out that because he wanted to make his master's grave perfect, the whole grave mound was a bit too round. Now he had forgotten which direction his master's head and feet were buried in. He couldn't just randomly pick a direction to insert the tombstone into. "Damn you!" Xianxia cursed and placed the tombstone on the ground. He wiped the sweat off his forehead and prepared to dig up the grave again to see how his master buried it. The white fox, who had been watching him from the side, saw him carrying a tombstone and walking around the grave. It did not know what he was trying to do. Was this a custom of some place? Her beautiful eyes widened as she looked at him curiously. It wasn't until this guy was about to dig up the grave that white fox reacted. It turned out that her silly brother had actually forgotten how master was buried. Now he wanted to dig up the buried master to see what was going on. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. He could afford to lose that person, but the people watching from the side felt that they couldn't. The white fox looked down and saw a stone under her feet. With a kick, the stone landed on the side of the grave mound and stabilized. Xianxia saw a stone fall. In this place, other than him and the white fox, there was no doubt that the stone was thrown by the latter. He squatted beside the grave and looked up at the white fox. Seeing her glaring at him, he finally realized that the white fox was reminding him where the tombstone should be buried. So he pointed at the location of the stone and shouted to her, "You mean to bury it here?" The white fox nodded. After Xianxia carried the tombstone to the location, he looked around and seemed to feel that it wasn't the right place. He could not help but shout to her again, Sister White, are you sure it's here? The white fox, who had always been elegant, could not help but roll her eyes this time. She decided to ignore him and let him do whatever he wanted. She turned around and walked away. He could vaguely hear the word idiot coming out of her mouth. Xianxia thought that she would not lie to him, so he buried the tombstone in that location. After that, he still felt that something was missing. Suddenly, his eyes lit up and he ran to the flowers and plants around him. The white fox, who was not far away, was attracted by her brother's action. Her face became a little ugly as she looked at him. There were not many wildflowers to begin with. After he picked them here and there, it became a mess. The nearby flowers were ruined by him. Finally, they were gathered into a wreath and placed in front of the master's tombstone. Then he caught 2 birds, roasted them and placed them in front of the master's tomb. He respectfully kowtowed a few times and swore that he would avenge his master. After a while, it was finally over. He raised his head and sighed. He turned around and saw the white fox standing alone in the wilderness. Then he looked around and found that there was no place to stay. He could not let the white fox live in the wilderness every day like him. He immediately had the idea of building a house. With a thought, he had already returned to the grotto. Now that there was no one playing or singing in the grotto, it was particularly quiet. Looking at the fluorite all over the stone wall, he remembered that his own territory also needed illumination at night. Without saying anything, he directly pried it and sent it to the golden pearl. While he was praying, he suddenly found that as long as his hand touched the fluorite, he could use his thought to lock it and send it to his own space. This discovery made him extremely happy. Only when a large piece of the stone wall of the grotto turned black did he stop. But he didn't know that the white fox in the golden pearl's space was also shocked when she saw the fluorite falling from the sky. But not long after, she guessed that it was Xianxia's trick. She also understood his intention. So she collected all the fluorite together. But not long after, an even more terrible thing happened. Big trees started to fall from the sky. One by one they started to fall, followed by the bamboo. The white fox flew to the side and looked at the sky dumbfoundedly. Outside, Xianxia wanted to get a few bigger trees for his own territory. But as long as it was a big tree that was too big for a person to carry, his thought was not able to take it away. He could only stand there and sigh at the trees. All around there were potholes left by the uprooted trees. He felt that it was almost enough. Looking at the top of the mountain, he remembered that Master still had some belongings. He decided to pack them up and bring them to his territory. The small courtyard was still quiet, but the people had changed. Standing outside the door, Xianxia's heart was heavy. He gently pushed open the courtyard door. He saw a person standing with his hands clasped behind his back. There was even a sword in his hand. That person turned around and looked at Xianxia. He smiled and said, "Shiji, you made me wait." It was Wu Baoru. Xianxia had stayed on the mountain for more than a year. Naturally, he knew this person. This person could be considered as his master's Xixiang. From that day when he took the initiative to plead for Lu Zhenguang, he could tell that he was also on the sect leader's side. Although he was unhappy, he still bowed solemnly and said, "Wu Shibua." Wu Baoru nodded. Seeing that he didn't look well, he thought that it was because of Master's death. He sighed and said, "Ai. How shitty. No one would have thought that such a thing would happen. The deceased is gone. Shiji, please restrain your grief. Where's Shidi's body? Restrain your mother. Old bastard. Lean and skinny, a sharp mouth and monkey cheeks. One look and you can tell that he's not a good person." Xianxia cursed in his heart. He said, "I've already buried Master in the back of the mountain." "Oh right. Did Shibua come here for something?" "Yes." Wu Baoru nodded. He stared at him and said, "Yesterday I saw Shiji and Zhenguang exchange palms. It really surprised the entire Ong Kuang Tsung. I didn't think that Shiji had already reached the 5th level of Qi training. I've received orders from the sect leader to grant you Ong Kuang Tsung's sword. From today onwards, you are Ong Kuang Tsung's registered disciple. From this month onwards, you can receive 500 low-grade spirit stones." After he finished speaking, he threw the sword in his hand over. Xianxia caught the sword. He glanced at Wu Baoru and didn't say anything. He thought to himself, "There's such a good thing? Hey, I don't believe in meat pies falling from the sky." Wu Baoru paced around the courtyard with his hands behind his back. He said in a low voice, "You've seen what happened to your master. It's not that the sect doesn't want to avenge your master. It's just that the sect's strength can't compare to the Deluo sect. Why can't we compare to the Deluo sect? It's because for thousands of years, the disciples with good root bones have all been taken by the big sections. In the long run, the strong become stronger and the weak become weaker. But now the time to change the sect's fate has come. At this point he stopped and stared at Yu Qianqiu with his triangular eyes. Heh. I'm afraid that what I'm going to say next is the main topic. Yu Qianqiu sneered in his heart. Sure enough. Shiji is a disciple without the slightest root bone. Logically speaking, he shouldn't be able to cultivate. But now his cultivation has reached the 5th level of qi training. This is really a piece of news that makes Ong Guangtsung excited. That's why the sect master specifically asked me to find Shiji to clarify the reason. As long as our Ong Guangtsung masters this secret, we won't have to worry about disciples without a good root bone anymore. In a few hundred years our Ong Guangtsung will also become the #1 sect in the world. At that time, Shiji will be our Ong Guangtsung's #1 hero. The more Wu Baoru spoke, the more excited he became. Then he started dancing with joy as if Ong Guangtsung's glory was tomorrow. Yu Qianqiu was overjoyed when he saw the old man's performance. He thought to himself, this old fart is really good material for multi-level marketing. He really thinks I'm an idiot when it comes to bewitching people. Don't you just want to know why I can cultivate? I won't tell you. After speaking passionately for half a day, Wu Baoru finally stopped. He looked at Yu Qianqiu with an excited gaze and said, Shiji understands how important this matter is to the sect. Quickly tell Uncle Master the secret behind it. I'll go back and report to the sect master. After that I'll definitely reward you handsomely. Yu Qianqiu scratched his head and asked in a daze, what secret? After speaking for so long this brat didn't understand. Did I say too much and it's too complicated? Wu Baoru took a deep breath and said, this is the secret of your cultivation? Yu Qianqiu asked doubtfully, is there a secret to my cultivation? There really isn't a secret? Wu Baoru clenched his teeth. Is there? Yu Qianqiu had a very silly and naive look on his face. Am I asking you or are you asking me? Wu Baoru finally couldn't help but roar out. I remember there is a secret. Yu Qianqiu came to a realization. Wu Baoru's eyes lit up. He said happily, what secret is it? Quickly tell Martial Uncle. The former shook his head and said, no, I can't say. Master has instructed me not to tell outsiders. The latter suddenly had the urge to grab Yu Qianqiu and beat him up. He thought to himself, junior brother how really knew about this secret long ago. He has no family and no mouth, and even in death he wants to bring this secret to his grave. He's really ruthless. The thought of this piqued his interest even more. He took a deep breath and said calmly with a smile, outsiders are people other than Ong Guangtsung. I'm your master's senior brother, so I'm not an outsider. If you tell me, your master won't blame you. Chapter 18. Looking at Wu Baoru's persuasive look, Yu Qianqiu thought to himself, I'll play with you slowly. He asked, really? Yes. The former nodded heavily. The latter hesitated for a while, then said, all right then. I'll tell you, but you mustn't tell anyone. Yes. After nodding, Wu Baoru could not help but sigh that how Xianxia had taken in an idiot as a disciple. Then swear a deadly oath that you won't tell anyone. Yu Qianqiu still looked worried. Wu Baoru took another deep breath. He thought to himself, I'll bear with it, I'll deal with you later. He slowly raised his hand and said, I swear that I won't tell anyone about the secret that Martial Nephew told me today. If I break this oath, I'll die a horrible death. You can tell me now, right? Yu Qianqiu nodded happily. He looked around as if he was afraid that someone would eavesdrop, then he lowered his voice and said, Martial Uncle, come closer, don't let anyone else hear. Wu Baoru's eyes lit up and he obediently brought his ear over. Yu Qianqiu said, I do have a secret when I'm cultivating. Master always gives me his spirit stone to absorb spiritual energy. Master doesn't allow me to tell anyone. Wu Baoru waited for a while. Seeing that there was no more sound, he turned to look at him and asked, anything else? Yu Qianqiu shook his head and said, nothing else. What? Nothing else? Wu Baoru let out a strange cry. What secret was this? It was normal for a master to give his favorite disciple a spirit stone to use. And the purpose was nothing more than for the disciples' cultivation to increase quickly. He suddenly felt like he was fooled. He grabbed Yu Qianchou's shirt and said gloomily, "Are you going to tell me or not?" Yu Qianchou snorted coldly. The silly look on his face instantly disappeared. He squinted his eyes and said indifferently, "What? You want to fight now that you can't trick him?" Huh. Wu Baoru was startled for a moment before he started laughing maniacally in anger. He had treated the other party as an idiot, but he had always been treated as an idiot by the other party. He had lost so much face. He said fiercely, "What a small character. You actually dare to trick me. I think you must be tired of living." He suddenly released his aura. How could the current Yu Qianchou withstand a nascent soul cultivator's aura? He was immediately suffocated by the aura, and the killing intent was clear. Yu Qianchou said coldly, "If you dare to touch a single hair of mine, I guarantee that you will never know this secret. If you don't believe me, you can try." "You think I don't dare?" Wu Baoru slowly raised a palm. "I'll wait and see." Yu Qianchou raised his eyebrows and smiled. "But there is something I have to remind you. If I die, I don't know if Ong Kwangtsung and the others will suspect that you took the secret for yourself." Although Wu Baoru's face didn't show any reaction, Yu Qianchou clearly saw his pupils shrink. The former laughed and said, "I will give you one last chance. If you don't tell me, I will kill you immediately." "Thank you. You don't have to give me another chance. Kill me now." Yu Qianchou smiled and looked at the other party. Although he said that, his mind was already locked on the golden pearl in his dantian. As soon as he confirmed that the other party was going to make a move, he would leave immediately. The muscles on Wu Baoru's face twitched. He rolled his triangular eyes and suddenly pushed Yu Qianchou away. He smiled evilly and said, "I almost fell into your trap. You're trying to provoke me." The latter pulled his clothes that were wrinkled. He shook his head and sighed, "Old B*****. You're obviously afraid that killing me will arouse the suspicion of the other old guys, but you still want to find a way out. If you knew this would happen, why would you show your fangs and claws? Old dog, look at what you've done to my clothes." He didn't leave any face with his words. Since he had already fallen out with him, there was no need to hide it. Hehe. Sharp-tongued little B*****, I won't gossip with you. I will destroy your dantian now and torture you for the rest of your life until you tell me. Wu Baoru was so angry that he was trembling. He had been in Ong Kwangtsung for so many years, and no one had ever scolded him like this before. Judging from his expression, it didn't seem like he was joking. He was really going to make a move. "Yo. I have the golden pearl, so I'm not afraid. Today seems to be the day to talk about insights. I'll play you to death, old dog." Yu Qianchou thought like this, but he sighed and said, "Stop, I'm afraid of you. If you want me to tell you, I'll go to Green Light Hall and tell the sect master personally. If you don't agree, I'll explode my dantian." Wu Baoru was stunned. He thought to himself, "I'll kill you immediately after you tell me." Then he readily agreed. As for what he was planning, Yu Qianchou could even guess it with his butt. Yu Qianchou swaggered in front, and Wu Baoru, who followed behind, had a cold smile on his face. The two of them walked towards Ong Kwangtsung Hall, one in front and one behind. Passing through the wall, they could see many disciples sitting in the middle of the square, listening to lectures. Below the hall sat a few elders who were giving lectures. A knowing smile appeared on Yu Qianchou's face. When they were about to reach the middle of the crowd, Yu Qianchou suddenly ran for his life. Wu Baoru was slightly stunned. He thought to himself, "Where can you run from here? Help. Someone wants to steal my spirit stones. Old dog wants to steal my spirit stones. Old bastard wants to murder me for money. Save me, sect leader." Yu Qianchou shouted with all his might. The entire square could hear his voice, and it was incomparably miserable. In an instant, countless eyes in the square turned to look at him. Wu Baoru did not expect this guy to do this in public. He almost fainted from anger. He shouted, "Stop." His figure flashed and he shot over. F***ck. Old dog is angry. Just as Yu Qianchou was about to hide in the golden pearl, a voice came from inside the hall. "Stop." At the same time, an elder who was giving lectures quickly flashed and blocked in front of Yu Qianchou. "Senior brother Lu, get out of the way. I want to kill him." Wu Baoru flew into a rage. The elder who was called Senior Brother Lu frowned and shouted, Junior brother Wu, why don't you look at where you are? What a disgrace. This person's name was Lu Wanwan. After being reminded by senior brother, Wu Baoru looked around and saw countless eyes looking at him in disbelief. Then he thought of the little bastard's cry and his heart sank. He had lost a lot of face today. But the hateful face behind senior brother was winking at him. He was so angry that his whole body trembled. He shouted, "I'm so angry. Who's making a racket outside the hall?" Sect Master Lu Chongqing walked out with a group of elders. Yu Qianqiu immediately turned around and shouted, "Save me, Sect Master. Martial Uncle Wu wants to kill me. Save me, Sect Master. Martial Uncle Wu wants to kill me." Lu Chongqing and the others immediately stared at Wu Baoru. They knew very well why Wu Baoru went to look for Yu Qianqiu. "Nonsense, I'm so angry. Little bastard, I'm going to kill you." Wu Baoru was so angry that he almost vomited blood. He leaped over Lu Wanwan and shot a ray of light at Yu Qianqiu. "Nonsense." Lu Chongqing flung out the horsetail whisk in his hand. The whisk instantly grew long and wrapped around the ray of light. A long sword was wrapped in it. Two elders flew out from his side and pulled Wu Baoru back. The latter stared at Yu Qianqiu with bloodshot eyes and screamed. He looked like he wanted to tear Yu Qianqiu into pieces. Lu Chongqing glanced at Wu Baoru and stared at Yu Qianqiu and asked, "What's going on?" "Save me, Sect Master." Yu Qianqiu seemed to be very frightened. He knelt down and cried loudly, "Today Martial Uncle Wu found me and forced me to tell a secret. He also took away the 100 mid-grade spirit stones that Master left for me. Originally I was going to swallow my anger and let it go. But for some reason Martial Uncle Wu refused to let me go. I think Martial Uncle Wu wants to kill me. I really feel wronged. I didn't expect that right after my master died Martial Uncle Wu would..." Sob. "Sect Master, please help me." The entire square immediately boiled over. Although the cultivation world was fickle in relationships, it was rare for a martial uncle to immediately snatch away his junior brother's disciples' belongings as soon as his junior brother died. Looking at Yu Qianqiu's pitiful appearance, no one would think that he would dare to frame martial uncle. Although no one dared to talk loudly, whispers were unavoidable. Everyone looked at Wu Baoru as if they were looking at a monster. There were also disciples from Wu Baoru's faction who lowered their heads in shame. Many female disciples heard about Yu Qianqiu's pitiful experience and saw how pitiful he was. Most of them had tears in their eyes. Among them, Chu Ping bit her lower lip. She didn't expect that the talent who composed two peerless songs would be abused like this. "Little bastard." He still dared to say, "I'll kill you." Wu Baoru struggled crazily, but with two senior brothers who had higher cultivation than him holding him down, how could he break free? Yu Qianqiu thought to himself, "Is this old fellow going crazy from anger?" With such poor mental fortitude he still imitated others to be a hooligan. "But it's good that he's mad, I'll give him some stimulation." "Martial Uncle Wu, you dare to do it, but you can't let me say it." Yu Qianqiu clutched his chest as if he was having a heart attack. He staggered a few steps, opened his arms and shouted to the sky, "Heavens! Open your eyes and take a look. There's actually such a crazy person in this world." After he stood up shakily, he pointed at Wu Baoru and said hysterically, "I have no enmity with you, why do you treat me like this? Why do you treat me like this?" His grief and anger made people cry. "Martial Uncle Yu is so pitiful." Some of the female disciples in front of the hall choked with sobs. One carried two carried three. Immediately many of the female disciples began to cry. Pooh! When these cries fell into Wu Baoru's ears, it was as if he had been struck by lightning. His entire body trembled, but he could do nothing to Yu Qianqiu. He was so angry that he spat out a mouthful of blood. Then his eyes rolled back and he fell into his senior brother's arms. F***ck. I'm so awesome, I actually made an original infant stage cultivator faint from anger. Yu Qianqiu looked at the person who spat out blood with tears in his eyes. Lu Chongqing's face was ashen. He never expected that sending Wu Baoru to look for Yu Qianqiu would cause such trouble. His eyes swept back and forth between the two of them, but he couldn't tell who was the victim. When he saw that Wu Baoru had fainted, he immediately stared at Yu Qianqiu. But the latter's face was so thick that he couldn't be seen through so easily. Chapter 19. The two senior martial brothers who were holding on to Wu Baoru sensed that he had really fainted, and they nodded at the sect leader. The elders were all experienced fellows, and they could understand each other's intentions with just a glance. Naturally, they understood what the two of them were thinking. They had originally suspected Yu Qianchou, and with Wu Baoru's cultivation, if he really wanted to kill him, he wouldn't have been able to come here. Now, a nascent soul-stage junior martial brother had actually fainted from anger, and it was easy to imagine the injustice he had suffered. "Where are the law enforcement disciples?" Lu Chongqing shouted. "Here." Several people appeared on both sides of the hall. The plaza immediately became silent, and everyone looked towards the front of the hall, knowing that the sect leader was about to make a decision. Before the truth is clear, the disciples cannot criticize. Let's put this matter aside for now. When Elder Wu recovers, the truth will naturally be clear. Lu Chongqing spoke first and then stared at the two who were complaining. Elder Wu chased and beat up a disciple in public, and everyone saw it with their own eyes. He will be imprisoned to recuperate and await punishment. Yu Qianchou publicly insulted a teacher, and everyone heard it with their own ears. He will be punished to do hard labor in the spirit stone mine and await punishment. Elders, do you have any objections? None of the elders had any objections. The disciples naturally didn't dare to have any objections to the sect leader's decision. However, everyone understood that this punishment was clearly to the disadvantage of Yu Qianchou. One had to know that the spirit stone mine was not a place for people to stay. It was clearly a place where Ong Kuang-tsung's disciples were exiled. The disciples who worked there were either those with poor aptitudes or those who had committed crimes. Every day they had a quota to mine spirit stones, and if they couldn't complete the task, they would be severely punished. Until now, not many people had returned alive from that place. In everyone's eyes, Yu Qianchou was obviously the victim, but he received the heaviest punishment, which inevitably made people think of the time when he offended the sect leader and his grandson. This was clearly revenge. No one dared to say anything and could only shake their heads and sigh in their hearts. When Lu Jingguang saw that Yu Qianchou was sent to the spirit stone mine as a punishment, he was delighted. However, he also felt that his grandfather was being too obvious by doing this in front of everyone. "Martial nephew Yu, do you have any objections?" Lu Chongqing asked coldly. "This disciple is willing to accept the punishment. I dare not have any complaints." Yu Qianchou's expression was bleak as he replied, causing all the disciples to feel sad. Little did he know that when he heard that they were going to a spirit stone mine, his heart began to beat wildly. With a wave of the sect leader's hand, Elder Wu was carried away. Yu Qianchou was also escorted to the spirit stone mine by the disciplinary disciples. Chu Ping'er stared at the lonely and staggering figure and bit her lips. She simply could not imagine the scene of such a talent working hard in a spirit stone mine. The sun hung high in the sky. Outside the spirit stone mine, there was a row of caves on each side. These were the living quarters of the mining disciples. On a piece of empty land in front of them, almost 100 dirty and ragged disciples were gathered together. On a stone pillar in front of them, a disciple was stripped naked and his hands and feet were chained to the pillar. A barbed whip danced in the air and a string of flesh and blood splattered everywhere. Every lash of the whip was followed by a blood-curdling scream. The surrounding disciples were all shocked. A bare-chested, fierce-looking cultivator paced back and forth with his hands behind his back. This person was an early-stage core formation cultivator named Gao Shiping. He was the overseer of this spirit stone mine. He was glaring at the frightened disciples like a tiger watching its prey. He viciously said, "Do you see that? This is the consequence of stealing spirit stones. I'm warning you all, listen carefully. Don't think that you can get away with it. No one can fish in troubled waters under my watch." As he spoke, he suddenly saw a flash of light in the distance. Two law enforcement disciples landed with a dejected disciple. Gao Shiping's fierce-looking face was covered with a smile. He ran over and said with a flattering smile, "Long time no see, two senior law enforcement brothers. You've sent someone to me again." As he spoke, he glanced at the dejected disciple. This person was Yu Qianchou, who was punished to do hard labor in the spirit stone mine. The two law enforcement disciples nodded. When they heard the whip and the blood-curdling scream, they looked towards the place where the punishment was being carried out. One of them frowned and asked, "Junior Marshal Brother Gao, what did that person do this time?" Senior Marshal Brother, this person is very hateful. He actually dared to secretly absorb the Spirit Stone's mind in the Spirit Stone mine. When he came out, the sect's magic treasure found out. According to the rules, he was punished with 500 lashes, Gao Shiping said. The other law enforcement disciple shook his head and sighed. I've never heard of anyone surviving under Junior Marshal Brother Gao's Wolf Fong whip. Yu Qianchou glanced over and saw the barbed Wolf Fong whip carrying a string of flesh and blood. He was secretly shocked. He thought to himself, what magic treasure? I still want to steal spirit stones. I don't know if it's dangerous. If I don't give a heavy punishment and everyone steals spirit stones in the future, I really won't be able to answer to the sect. Gao Shiping chuckled. He looked at Yu Qianchou and asked the two law enforcement disciples, why is this disciple here? One of the law enforcement disciples shook his head and smiled bitterly. Marshal Uncle Hao's disciple, what else do you think? That Yu Qianchou who offended the sect leader? Gao Shiping was shocked. Seeing that the law enforcement senior marshal brother had already nodded to confirm, he smiled fiercely and said, hey. So it's Junior Marshal Brother you. You really have guts. You even dared to offend the sect leader. Old Gao, I will definitely treat you well. After that he turned around and shouted, someone come. Yu Qianchou knew that he was famous in Ongquang, but he didn't expect that there would be people who knew about this spirit stone mine so far away. Soon after, a supervisor ran over and took Yu Qianchou away under Gao Shiping's arrangement. He could vaguely hear one of the law enforcement disciples saying, Junior Marshal Brother Gao, you can't kill this person. The elders specifically said that he still has a use for us. The supervisor brought him to the group of disciples who were mining the mine. First he showed him what it meant to be whipped until his intestines were broken. After seeing it, Yu Qianchou didn't have any reaction. He also didn't think that the disciple who was being punished was worthy of pity. In his words, since you dared to steal, then you should be prepared to be caught. You don't deserve other people's pity for courting death. He looked around at the disciples who were mining the mine. All of them were skinny. Other than the fear they showed when they saw the punishment being carried out on their dirty faces, the rest of their expressions were numb and submissive. He let out a long sigh in his heart. It seemed that these people had been living under oppression for a long time. This group of supervisors was really ruthless. The disciple who was whipped on the stone pillar was already dead, but they still didn't let go of the corpse. They only stopped when the Wolf Fong whips had smashed the corpse into pieces. Yu Qianchou narrowed his eyes. A cold light flashed in his eyes. Could it be that they had a grudge against each other? They actually wanted to whip the corpse to vent their hatred. After that, the miners were chased back to their respective caves. Yu Qianchou was led to a place by the supervisor. The space wasn't big. There were only mattresses on the ground. There were already 3 people lying on the ground. It seemed that 4 people would have to squeeze together. The supervisor said coldly, you will stay here. Shi Xiaotian, tell him what to do next. The last sentence was said to a young man lying on the ground. When the young man called Shi Xiaotian heard the supervisor's words, he hurriedly got up and responded. The supervisor didn't say anything else and turned to leave. Shi Xiaotian's face was very dirty, but one could vaguely tell that he was a handsome young man. Of course, Yu Qianchou had also stayed in the cultivation world for a long time. He knew that one couldn't judge someone's age by their appearance. Shi Xiaotian's big eyes looked at this newcomer blankly. Yu Qianchou smiled at Shi Xiaotian in a friendly manner. However, Shi Xiaotian didn't seem to appreciate it. He only told Shi Xiaotian to follow him and didn't say anything else. He brought him to get the mining tools. The tools were very simple. A custom-made pickaxe and a basket that could be carried on one's back. After they were done, Shi Xiaotian slowly told him some of the rules and the two of them returned to the cave. Actually, Yu Qianchou really wanted to ask him what was the so-called magical equipment that could be checked. However, Shi Xiaotian didn't answer any of his questions. The mining rules didn't sound difficult. He just didn't know how to do it. Each person had to hand in a high-grade spirit stone every day. In other words, you could take 100 middle-grade spirit stones or 10,000 low-grade spirit stones. If you couldn't complete the task, you couldn't rest or eat. For cultivators, this wasn't the most important thing. Even if you couldn't eat or rest for a day or two before reaching the core formation stage, it was fine. The worst part was that if you couldn't complete the task today, the difference would be doubled the next day. If you couldn't complete the task in 3 days, The punishment would be based on the difference. As for those who completed the task in excess, the excess could be accumulated until the next time you didn't complete the task. Alternatively, you could enjoy 1% of the excess spirit stones. The miner could choose between the two methods. If someone chose the latter, then you had to guarantee that you could complete the task every time. Otherwise, you would still be punished because your previous excess spirit stones had already been used up. The strictest rule was that if someone dared to steal spirit stones or secretly absorb spirit stones in the cave, they would be dead if they were discovered. As for these rules, Xianxia remembered them. He wasn't worried about being punished for completing the task. Instead, he was thinking about how to steal spirit stones without being discovered while ensuring that he could complete the task. This way he could continue to stay in the spirit stone cave and continue stealing. In his current situation, if he wanted to increase his cultivation level, he really needed spirit stones. Now that the opportunity was right in front of him, it was impossible for him not to steal. This was because his way of thinking was no different from his previous life. The principle that a horse wouldn't get fat without night grass and a man wouldn't get rich without a windfall was deeply engraved in his consciousness. What worried him the most was the magic tool that Gao Shiping mentioned. If he hid spirit stones in the golden bead, he didn't know if it would be discovered. The sound of snoring echoed in the cave, making Xianxia very surprised. How could cultivators sleep so soundly? What was the difference between them and mortals? He couldn't figure it out. He really wanted to hide in the golden bead world, but he was afraid that someone would discover his sudden disappearance. He could only endure the three people's continuous snoring. The next day, Xianxia discovered that everyone here was minding their own business. No one would pay attention to him. He imitated the three people, carrying a basket on his back and carrying a pickaxe. He followed them to the entrance of the spirit stone mine. He stood in the crowd and looked around, looking very different. Especially his clothes, which were many times cleaner than the others, were very eye-catching. Chapter 20. Don't look around. I'm talking to you. Come here. The supervisor at the cave entrance pointed at Xianxia and shouted rudely. Only then did the latter realize that the people in front of him had already gone in. He hurried over. The supervisor took out a bronze mirror and shone it at him. A white light flashed on the mirror. Could this be a magic tool? While he was still puzzled, the supervisor pushed him into the mine. You're dressed like a dog. Next. He heard the words of the supervisor behind him, but he didn't think much about it. He looked around the mine. It was pitch black. He really didn't know how to dig spirit stones in this kind of environment. He slowed down and walked in. After his eyes gradually adapted to the darkness, he heard the sound of several people running in. Gold ingots dropped in front? He really had to give it to them. They could even run in this kind of environment. While he was shaking his head, he suddenly noticed that there were sporadic lights on the walls around the mine. What was this? As he moved forward, there were more and more sporadic lights. They covered the four walls, even under his feet. It made him feel like he was walking on a starry avenue. When he got closer, he discovered that they were actually fluorites. They were obviously not installed by humans. They were naturally formed. This also explained why he could dig for spirit stones in the cave even without any light. He stood at a few forks in the tunnel and was choosing which one to enter. Suddenly, another miner rushed into each of the forks in a hurry. Although he didn't know why, there must be a reason why everyone was so anxious. Thinking of this, he didn't hesitate anymore. He randomly picked a hole and quickly walked in. The mine was deep and low. The deeper he went, the more crossroads he found, like a spider web. This place was like a maze. He was really worried that if he went in too much, he wouldn't be able to get out. Frowning, he shook his head and scolded himself for being stupid. Since the terrain was downward, when he wanted to go out, he just had to go to a higher place. He could already faintly hear the sound of people digging in many of the holes. He didn't know where to dig, so he picked a hole with a louder sound and went in. Ding ding ding. Hearing the sound, he turned a corner. There were several low-grade spirit stones on the ground, including a middle-grade one. A miner was waving his pick and digging with all his might. Ha! Not bad, not bad. I've already gained something. Xianxia smiled enthusiastically. As he spoke, he put down the basket on his back. He held the pickaxe and looked around, looking for a place to start. The tinkling sound suddenly stopped. He turned around and saw that the miner was looking at him warily. He nodded and smiled again. Obviously the miner did not welcome him. His smile was a little awkward. Get out. I discovered this vein first, the miner said bluntly. Xianxia was a little angry. Damn it. We're all miners, so why are you chasing me out? However, he couldn't see through the other person's cultivation level. It was obvious that the other person's cultivation level was higher than his. A little impatience will spoil great plans. Even though he was unhappy for the sake of his great cause of stealing spirit stones, he decided to swallow his anger. He rolled his eyes, picked up the basket and walked out with a sullen face. What happened next was the same. In every small hole there was a person digging. When they saw him they would bluntly announce, "This is my territory, get out." What made him most discouraged was that almost everyone he saw had a higher cultivation level than him. He wanted to find someone to vent his anger, but there was no one to vent it on. Now he finally understood why those people ran after entering the mine. They were all afraid that the spirit stone vein they discovered last time would be taken by someone else, so they rushed to take over. In a fit of anger he walked towards the deepest part of the mine. He didn't know how many years he had been digging, how long he had walked and how many turns he had taken. Finally he reached the end of the mine. Damn it! There shouldn't be anyone chasing me out here. He cursed and put down the basket. He held the pickaxe in his hand and couldn't help but feel excited. In front of him was a dead end. It was as if he could see the spirit stones waving at him. He raised the pickaxe with both hands and started digging. Ding! Damn it! Xianxia screamed and threw the pickaxe to the side. He raised his numb hands and sighed. He shook his hands and picked up the pickaxe to test it on the surrounding walls. Ding ding ding. Everywhere was as hard as stone. No wonder the sound of digging sounded like blacksmithing. He was too impatient. He tried again and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. How was this digging? This was clearly digging a hole in a stone mountain. In the past he really didn't know that spirit stones grew in such a place. The amount of spirit stones used by so many people in Ongquangsung depended on these people to dig them out bit by bit. Even though he heard that there were other spirit stone mines in other places, the miners there probably didn't have it easy either. He tried to inject chi into the pickaxe. Ding ding ding. Sure enough, it started digging. Xianxia was extremely excited. He swung his arms and dug with all his might. It was good to have enthusiasm for work, but not being able to produce results was often the most painful thing. He dug for a long time. Not to mention spirit stones, he didn't even see a single hair. With the continuous consumption of the chi in his body, he was unable to keep up with the expenditure. At this rate he would die of exhaustion before he could dig up any spirit stones. He wasn't a reckless person. He immediately stopped and decided to figure out what the problem was. Based on the limited common sense from his previous life, the first thing he could confirm was that things such as gold and precious stones all had their own veins and directions. He believed that the same principle applied to spirit stones. The fluorite that could be found everywhere should be associated with spirit stones. This cobweb-like hole must have been dug by the miners in the past. If they stopped here, did it mean that there were no more spirit stones ahead? He didn't understand this point, so he couldn't make a judgment. He wanted to find someone to ask, but the miners here would probably get the same result. No one would tell him. What a headache. Damn it. Why am I so stupid? Xianxia slapped his forehead in annoyance. Sister Bai's fox clan was an expert in digging holes. He should ask her. He carefully looked around. After confirming that there was no one, he picked up the tool and disappeared. Sister Bai, help. Xianxia, who returned to his own territory, shouted a few times and stopped. A forest suddenly appeared in front of him. The bamboos were swaying and a familiar melody came from the forest. If it wasn't for the purple chaos around him, he would have suspected that he had gone to the wrong place. He walked into the forest in doubt. A green and exquisite bamboo house appeared in front of him. The style was very retro. The bamboo house was surrounded by a bamboo fence. There was a small bamboo pavilion inside, and a beautiful woman in white was playing the zither and singing. Who else could it be if not the white fox? Xianxia, who was relieved, looked around again and smiled with satisfaction. Looking at the white fox playing the zither and singing, he couldn't help but admire it. As expected of an artist, its aesthetic standards were higher than ordinary people. The forest surrounded the bamboo forest and the bamboo forest surrounded the bamboo house. The environment was quiet. He didn't expect that the thing he had thrown in a few days ago would be turned into this by the white fox in just a few days. The layout was appropriate and pleasing to the eye. He walked in with a smile. Although the white fox didn't even raise her head, with her late-stage tribulation passing stage cultivation, she would definitely know that he had come. Xianxia walked to the pavilion and called out, "Sister, bye." Unexpectedly, the white fox didn't pay attention to him. She didn't even raise her head. Xianxia's heart skipped a beat. She had a problem with him. He didn't know how he had offended her, but it wasn't a good thing. He was just about to ask her for help. Xianxia sat at the side with a mischievous smile. He stuck his head out and said, "Yo, whose beauty is playing the zither? Beauty, this young man greets you." Beauty, beauty, beauty. To be honest, after this younger brother left her here, she couldn't even see his shadow for a few days. It made her feel like she had just been released from captivity and was trapped again. How could she not be angry? However, she couldn't do anything about this shameless person. She ignored him, but he kept calling her beauty. The sound of the zither stopped. The white fox's face turned slightly red. She raised her head and said angrily, "Do you still remember that you have a sister like me? If you have the ability, then don't come back. Are you digging for spirit stones?" The last sentence was said when she saw the thing in Xianxia's hand. Xianxia was stunned. The white fox's words made him feel a little strange. It was like a wife who had been living alone at home for a few days and finally saw her dead husband. The thought flashed through his mind. He avoided the question and replied, "Sister's eyes are really sharp. You saw through it with one look." He then told the white fox about how he was punished to do hard labor in the spirit stone mine. However, he hid the fact that he had wronged Wu Baoru. This kind of feeling was understandable. No one would want to expose their despicable and shameless side to the public. He told the white fox that because he had offended sect leader Ong Kwang-tsung, and now that his master was dead, he was immediately attacked by the sect leader for revenge. He was sent to the spirit stone mine to do hard labor. If he couldn't complete the task, he would face severe punishment. A dignified sect leader is actually so narrow-minded. The white fox frowned. She stared at the smiling face in front of her and said, "You have the golden bead. If you want to escape, no one in Ong Kwang-tsung can stop you. Could it be that you are here to ask for my help?" Sister is wise. I haven't even said it and you already know." Xianxia laughed. The white fox was slightly annoyed. She took out the mountain-piercing claw from her waist and threw it to him. Xianxia hugged the item and smiled from ear to ear. He stood up and was about to leave. He suddenly remembered something and asked, "At the entrance of the mine, I saw Ong Kwang-tsung's disciple holding a bronze mirror and shining it on my body. Sister, do you know what it's used for?" "It's just a very ordinary magic tool. It doesn't have much use. If someone secretly absorbs spiritual energy or hides spirit stones on their body, it's very easy to find out. All the big sects in the cultivation world use it in their spirit stone mines." "Why do you ask?" the white fox asked curiously. "It's nothing. Sister, if I put spirit stones in the golden bead, will the magic tool be able to find them?" Xianxia asked again. The white fox lightly shook her head and said, "It can't even find spirit stones in storage bags. I think it's even harder to find the space inside the golden bead." Xianxia heaved a sigh of relief. He nodded and said, "I was worried to death. Since it can't be found, then I'm relieved. Sister, I'll leave first." "You?" The white fox was stunned. This bastard is probably asking this to steal spirit stones. If that's the case, wouldn't I be helping the evildoer? When she came back to her senses, she wanted to stop him and ask him questions, but he was already gone. Chapter 21. Xianxia appeared in the mine and listened carefully. The surroundings were very quiet. He put down the pickaxe and put on the mountain-piercing claws. After infusing his true qi, the gloves immediately became one with his palms. The 10 sharp claws were dark and shiny, and he clawed at the wall. Swoosh! Stone chips flew. Didn't they say that the gloves could feel spiritual energy? Then let's try it. He pressed his claws on the wall. As soon as he calmed down, he felt that the gloves seemed to have an impulse to pull him to the left. Xianxia's heart was beating fast. He really felt spiritual energy. His hands moved according to the feeling from the gloves. It was not until they moved 3 to 4 meters from their original position that they stopped. Although the distance it had moved wasn't far, it was still far from the direction he had intended to dig in. Right in front of him he could clearly feel the spirit stones that he wanted to dig up. Xianxia was very glad. If not for the gloves, no matter how fast he dug, it would be useless. "Baby, I'm coming," Xianxia shouted excitedly in his heart. His 10 claws moved and he rushed at the stone wall in front of him. Swoosh swoosh. There was no sound of clanking. It was like a sharp knife cutting through paper. The stone wall could not withstand a single blow and was destroyed in an instant. Not long after, a hole a few meters deep was dug. The feeling in front was also getting stronger and stronger, encouraging Xianxia to move forward bravely. When he clawed down and saw a crystal white part of the stone wall, he could not help but cheer. Then he covered his mouth and laughed secretly. Finally he dug out a spiritual stone. Suddenly he remembered that his basket and pickaxe were still in the tunnel outside. He immediately went out and looked around to see that no one was around. He picked up the things and went back into the tunnel. After digging out the spiritual stone, he held it in his hand and looked at it carefully. This was the first time he found that the spiritual stone was so beautiful. It was crystal clear and cute no matter how he looked at it. Unfortunately, it was only a low-grade spiritual stone. He shook his head and threw the spiritual stone into the basket. Then he patted his head again. Not knowing what he thought, he picked up the pickaxe and the basket with the low-grade spiritual stone and threw them into his space. If he continued to work hard, perhaps the superior spirit stones were just ahead. Now that he had an income, he was even more excited. He followed the feeling of mountain-piercing claw without stopping. Not long after, the occasional appearance of 1 or 2 spirit stones on the stone wall gradually increased to several spirit stones appearing at the same time. All of them were eagerly put into his own space by his fingers. Although they were all low-grade, he did not reject any of them and did not waste any of the fruits of his labor. Holy shit! Great harvest. 1, 2, 3, 9. Another 10 low-grade spirit stones. The 10 low-grade spirit stones that appeared at the same time disappeared one by one as he counted with his fingers. After digging nearly 100 pieces of low-grade spirit stones, a thick white crystal appeared in front of his eyes. It was exactly the same as the middle-grade spirit stone that his master had given him. Needless to say, the first mid-tier spirit stone was in his hands. As he continued to dig, Xianxia became more and more excited. The density of the spirit stones was getting higher and higher. For every 100 low-grade spirit stones, he would find 1 mid-grade spirit stone. When he had dug out close to 100 mid-grade spirit stones, he suddenly felt something strange coming from his mountain-piercing claw. Could it be that high-grade spirit stones were about to appear? Slightly stunned, he immediately dug in that direction without any regard for his life. Of course, the correct judgment would not disappoint him. When a light golden spirit stone appeared on the stone wall, Xianxia carefully dug it out. He took off the mountain-piercing claw and held it in his hand to carefully examine it. There was no doubt about it. This was a high-grade spirit stone. It was the first time he had seen a high-grade spirit stone. He had heard from his master that it was light golden in color. The light golden spirit stone was as beautiful as amber. Under the illumination of the fluorite, it exuded an enchanting luster. Looking at it, Xianxia was dazzled. Feeling the rich spiritual energy in the spirit stone in his hand, he really wanted to inhale it into his body, but he still controlled that impulse. Not for anything else, but for the increasing number of high-grade spirit stones. He swallowed his saliva and said, "You want me to hand over such a good thing? Even if you beat me to death, I won't do it." The amber-like crystal disappeared in his hand. The white fox in the golden bead confirmed her guess. Sure enough, not long after Xianxia disappeared, spirit stones began to fall from the sky. They fell precisely in the courtyard and piled up into a small pile. She just shook her head. Those things were not tempting to her. For a person whose cultivation had reached the late stage of passing calamity, she had already reached the peak of the cultivation world. Spirit stones had no effect on her. Xianxia also discovered the rule of digging spirit stones. Every time he dug in a direction, the first spirit stone he dug would be a low-grade spirit stone. Every 100 low-grade spirit stones would be surrounded by a middle-grade spirit stone, and in nearly 100 such groups, there would only be 1 high-grade spirit stone. After knowing this rule, he was no longer interested in those low-grade spirit stones. It was a waste of time and not worth it. He directly dug out a high-grade spirit stone, which was equivalent to tens of thousands of low-grade spirit stones. Only when he was casually digging did he put the middle-grade and low-grade spirit stones into the space. Counting the time, almost a day had passed. Excluding the half of the day that was wasted, he estimated that he had dug out nearly 100 high-grade spirit stones, hundreds of middle-grade spirit stones, and thousands of low-grade spirit stones. His mood changed from excitement to disapproval. This was the psychological change from a poor person to a rich person. He probably didn't know that his income in the half of the day was equivalent to the output of this spirit stone mine in a day. This was naturally due to the contribution of the Fox clan's treasure, the mountain-piercing claw. For 3 consecutive days he almost non-stop digging. He didn't hand in spirit stones every day like other people. The spirit stones in his hand were enough for him to hand in spirit stones for 3 days at a time. However, at the end of the 2nd day he felt a little hungry. After all, he hadn't reached the bearing essence stage yet. He went to the golden bead and roasted a pheasant to eat. Seeing the pile of spirit stones that almost filled half of the courtyard, he smiled very happily and sighed that his hard work was not in vain. However, the white fox warned him that if he dared to throw another spirit stone into the courtyard, she would take back the mountain-piercing claw. This threat was quite effective. After that, he threw all the spirit stones into the forest outside the courtyard. The deadline of 3 days was up. Xianxia came out carrying a basket full of spirit stones. At the entrance of the cave, there were more than 10 supervisors counting the spirit stones for the miners. He who was at the back of the line had to wait for a while before it was his turn. Just as he walked over, he heard someone say, "Let me see." He looked up and saw the fierce-looking Zhou Xian smiling at him. "Junior Marshal Brother Yu, I've been waiting for you to come out. I wonder how you finished the task." Zhou Xian said with a fake smile. This guy's attitude wasn't too friendly. Xianxia put the basket on the big table at the entrance of the cave and said with a smile, "It's my first time, so I'm not used to it. Fortunately, I managed to finish the task." A pile of spirit stones fell on the table, shining brightly. A trace of greed flashed in Zhou Xian's eyes, but it was quickly hidden. All of this fell into Xianxia's eyes. The corner of his mouth slightly curled up, revealing a trace of a smile. The former waved his hand and 2 supervisors came over to count the spirit stones. "Senior Marshal Brother Gao, there's something I'd like to ask." Xianxia gestured for him to speak first. Zhou Xian frowned. He thought to himself, "I gave you some face, but you really opened a dye shop. I called you Junior Marshal Brother out of politeness, but you really dared to call me brother. Why don't you find out what kind of place this is?" Thinking of the 2 senior marshal brothers' instructions, he could not offend them too much. Perhaps one day when they returned to Ongquangsung and gained power, he might have to beg them for help. He walked to the side with a sullen face and said coldly, "Junior Marshal Brother Yu, what's the matter? This is my first time here, so I'm afraid that I might have done something wrong. If I've offended you in any way, please forgive me." Xianxia raised his hand and bowed to Zhou Xian. A faint gold color flashed in his hand. He looked around and saw that no one was paying attention to him. When he lowered his hand, the faint gold color slid into the latter's clothes. Zhou Xian saw the alluring faint gold color the moment Xianxia raised his hand. He naturally knew what it was, but before he could react, it had already slipped into his clothes. Zhou Xian's body trembled, and his hand subconsciously pressed on the thing in his abdomen. His eyes flashed as he stared at Xianxia. The temptation of a high-grade spirit stone was too great, and he was considering whether or not to accept it. As a core formation stage cultivator, he could only receive 25 middle-grade spirit stones every month. A high-grade spirit stone could last him for 4 months. Although he was the supervisor of the spirit stone mine, he had never dared to take a spirit stone from here. If someone found out, the consequences would be unthinkable, especially since there were 3 nascent soul stage elders guarding this place. Zhou Xian lowered his voice and said, "It's my duty to take care of Junior Brother, but Junior Brother was sent here by the sect to do hard labor. If you can't complete the task or do something you shouldn't do, I can't take care of you. After all, there are 3 elders here and there are some things that I can't decide." Hearing the meaning behind his words, Zhou Xian could take care of him, but there were some things that he could take care of and some things that he couldn't. For example, if he couldn't complete the task, or if he stole or absorbed spirit stones. Damn it. He had the heart of a thief but no guts. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his nose and patted Gao Shiping's hand that was pressing on his abdomen. He smiled and said, "Senior brother, don't worry. I definitely won't do anything that would make things difficult for senior brother. I just want to live a little more freely here. I believe that this won't make things difficult for senior brother." Gao Shiping was still a little hesitant and the supervisor shouted, "Yu Qianqiu, the task is completed and you have received 500 low-grade spirit stones. Come over and be inspected. Senior brother, don't worry." Yu Qianqiu said softly and walked over. The supervisor took a bronze mirror and looked at it and didn't find anything unusual. Gao Shiping, who had been watching the scene, let out a sigh of relief and shouted to the supervisor, "Watch it closely." After saying that, he walked over to Yu Qianqiu and smiled, "Junior brother, you got more than 500 low-grade spirit stones on your first mining trip. I've been here for so many years and this is the first time I've seen something like this. I really admire you." He wasn't being polite. If he included the top-grade spirit stone that he collected, it would be 10,500 low-grade spirit stones. This was something that had never been seen among the newbies. Luck, pure luck. I just happened to come across a good vein," Yu Qianqiu said modestly. The two of them chatted and laughed as they left and the others looked at them in disbelief. Gao Shiping had always been secretly called Butcher Gao, and countless miners had died in his hands. When had they ever seen him being so nice to the miners? Chapter 22. Coincidentally, a supervisor passed by and saw this scene. He smiled and asked Gao Shiping, "Martial uncle, who is this? Sorry to trouble you to accompany us." Yu Qianqiu turned his head to the side as if he didn't hear anything. Gao Shiping's expression sank and he shouted at the supervisor, "Don't be rude. This is your Yu Qianqiu Shishuyu. He only made a small mistake and was temporarily punished to work here. It won't be long before he goes back. How can you compare him to normal miners?" Martial uncle you. The supervisor smiled apologetically. His smile was a little insincere as he muttered in his heart, "So it's that Yu Qianqiu who offended the sect leader. If even this is a small mistake, then most of the miners here can be considered as sinners. Junior brother, don't take his words to heart. Come, let's have a drink at my place." Gao Shiping invited. Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands and smiled, "Then I'll do as you say." The two of them laughed and walked towards the supervisor's residence with their arms around each other's shoulders. They immediately attracted the attention of many people, especially some of the miners whose eyes were filled with envy. The days of the supervisor were very comfortable. With a command, good wine and dishes were quickly placed on the table in the refreshing wooden house. The two of them were in a good mood and frequently raised their cups, drinking happily. Of course, there was a reason why the miners could rest for one day every 3 days. It was because the labor intensity of mining was too high and most of the miners' cultivation was below the foundation establishment stage. If they didn't rest, they would probably die from exhaustion before long. This type of work wasn't something a normal person could do. If it was a normal person, they probably wouldn't be able to dig more than a few pieces in a day. Naturally, resting was one of the ways to ensure the amount of mining. Before they left the table, Yu Qianqiu burped and said, "Speaking of which, it's quite a coincidence. Before I entered the sect, I was quite knowledgeable in the way of mining. If senior brother Gao trusts me, on the last day of every 3 days, please continue to guard the cave for me." How could Gao Shiping not understand the meaning behind this? His eyes immediately lit up. The two of them laughed heartily and confided in each other. In the end, Gao Shiping insisted on sending him off, and Yu Qianqiu found it hard to refuse his kindness. In the end, Gao Shiping sent Yu Qianqiu directly to his cave. Butcher Gao's arrival scared the other 3 people in the cave so much that they quickly got up. The two of them exhaled the smell of alcohol and called each other affectionately. It was really enviable for others. Looking at his junior brother's living environment, Gao Shiping frowned. He patted his chest and promised, "Junior brother, please bear with it for now. Tomorrow I'll find a clean place to stay. Leave this matter to me." After Butcher Gao came, the way the 3 of them looked at Yu Qianqiu changed greatly. They became much more reserved and they no longer dared to touch his buttocks. Yu Qianqiu understood what was going on. He looked at the 3 of them and noticed a bloody wound on Zhou Xian's back. Clearly he was whipped by the wolf Fong whip. he couldn't help but ask, Zhou Xian, what happened to your back? Hearing him called, Zhou Xian quickly got up and replied to his martial uncle. After seeing the relationship between Yu Qianchou and the Lord Warden, he didn't dare to act like he did before. It turned out that Zhou Xian was still short of 100 low-grade spirit stones for this mission. According to the rules, he had to be whipped by the Wolf Fong whip. This injury was a punishment. Seeing him speak, Yu Qianchou asked a few more questions. Zhou Xian answered them one by one. Speaking of which, Zhou Xian was quite unlucky. His family was originally a noble in the Wuxia Empire. Because of his good innate talent, he was fancied by a certain core formation stage cultivator in Ongquang, who wanted to take him as a disciple. In the Wuxia Empire, cultivation was a blessing that could only be encountered by chance. Naturally, his family happily agreed to take him as a disciple. Therefore, Zhou Xian went to Ongquang. With his good innate talent, he reached the 4th level of the qi refining stage in the first year. However, in the second year, his master was killed by someone at the foot of the mountain. The worst thing was that he and the grandson of an elder fell in love with a female disciple at the same time. They were youngsters. It was inevitable that they would fight for a woman's affection. In the end, they angered an elder and were kicked here. When Yu Qianchou heard that his master was also dead, he couldn't help but look at him a few more times. When he talked about fighting for a woman, he couldn't help but laugh. When he looked at Zhou Xian again, he felt a sense of sympathy. Therefore he wanted to help him. Tomorrow you and I will go dig for spirit stones together. After speaking, Yu Qianchou sat cross-legged and closed his eyes. Zhou Xian was stunned. Although he was unwilling, he didn't dare to say anything. Until many years later, when he thought back to that night, he couldn't help but lament that fate played a huge joke on him. From that night onwards, his fate took a complete turn. The next day, Yu Qianchou, who was sitting cross-legged and meditating, fell asleep at some point. In his dream, he was intimate with a certain someone who was bathing in the forbidden area. He probably heard the story of Zhou Xian's jealousy and dreamed of it at night. Otherwise, how could the fairy sister he hadn't dreamed of for a long time appear again? When he woke up with a yawn, the sun was already high in the sky. Wiping away the saliva at the corner of his mouth, Zhou Xian's dirty face couldn't hide the anxiety in front of him. Looking at the other 2 people in the cave, Yu Qianchou smiled in satisfaction. He would never mistreat those who listened to him. Martial uncle, you're awake. It's almost noon. Let's hurry. In fact, Zhou Xian had wanted to leave long ago. If it wasn't for the relationship between Yu Qianchou and Gao Tufu, he wouldn't have seen him now. Looking at the 2 sets of mining tools in front of him, Yu Qianchou grunted and walked out empty-handed. Zhou Xian picked up the 2 baskets and followed. Although Yu Qianchou didn't say anything, he nodded in his heart. If Zhou Xian didn't even know how to look at things, then he wouldn't be worth his help. The area around the spirit stone mine had long since become empty. Apart from some guards, only a few people could be seen at the entrance of the mine. Junior brother, you really made me wait. Gao Shiping, who was at the entrance, laughed when he saw the 2 people walking over. Yu Qianchou also waved his hand, walked over and said with a smile, I don't dare to trouble senior brother. It's just that I drank too much yesterday and I'm a little tired, so I overslept. This is... Gao Shiping looked at Zhou Xian, who was behind him, and asked in confusion. Yu Qianchou sighed, there's strength in numbers. I've specially found someone to help me. I believe we'll be more confident in completing the task. I believe in junior brother's ability, and you definitely won't disappoint me. Perhaps only Yu Qianchou could understand the deeper meaning behind Gao Shiping's words. Gao Shiping then took out something wrapped in a banana leaf and said, Junior brother, you'll probably be in there for another 3 days. This is some food. Junior brother, bring it in to eat. Smelling the aroma of meat, Yu Qianchou accepted it with thanks. The other supervisors' eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Since when did Butcher Gao become so meticulous? Some even suspected that the 2 of them had homosexual fetishes. The other supervisors also addressed them as Martial Uncle Yu affectionately. After inspecting the 2 late miners, they let them into the cave. Even Zhou Xian benefited a lot from following behind him, and the cold and emotionless Butcher Gao actually nodded and smiled at him. This was really something that only happened once in 1,000 years. Yu Qianchou slowly walked towards the deepest part of the mine. Zhou Xian followed behind him, wishing he could give him a kick. Half of the day had already passed and he was still so calm. Xianxia walked all the way to the entrance of the cave that they dug yesterday. He smiled and said, "You didn't eat anything this morning, right? It's all my fault for oversleeping. Come eat something first. You'll have the strength to work when you're full." As he spoke, he opened the banana leaf and revealed a big pile of fragrant golden yellow barbecued meat. He tore off half of it and handed it to Zhou Xian. Xianxia took a bite. The taste was really not bad. He was starting to like Gao Shiping, who was willing to work hard after receiving money. He was not like some people in his previous life who did not do anything after receiving money. He hated those people the most. Just as he was enjoying his meal, he suddenly heard someone crying. He saw Zhou Xian holding the large piece of barbecued meat and crying. Xianxia was taken aback. He asked curiously, "Why are you crying?" "Martial uncle, little Tian has not eaten meat for a long time. Little Tian is homesick." Zhou Xian wiped his tears and sobbed. "What a child." Xianxia swallowed the meat in his mouth and said, "Damn. I was wondering what you were doing. You're crying like a girl. Hurry up and eat. We'll work after eating." Therefore the two of them squatted in the deepest part of the mine, hugging the barbecued meat and gnawing on it. The sound of chewing echoed. After eating, Zhou Xian patted his stomach happily. Xianxia asked him to take his tools and brought him into the cave that he had dug. When Zhou Xian saw the exposed spirit stones all around the cave walls, his eyes immediately widened in disbelief. It was obvious that someone had dug this cave before, but why were the spirit stones right in front of him left untouched? Of course, he did not know that these were leftovers from Xianxia's digging. He was too lazy to pick them up. Xianxia pointed deep into the cave and said, "I found this. There are more in there, just like here there are exposed spirit stones. Just a few of them will be enough for us to finish our mission for 3 days. Little Tian, I asked you to dig enough for 2 people for 3 days. Will you do it?" Zhou Xian nodded excitedly and said, "Don't worry, Martial Uncle. You can rest at the side and leave it to me. It won't take much effort to dig these spirit stones." "Damn it. Do you think I brought you here to slack off?" Xianxia was in a bad mood after being misunderstood. The muscles on his face twitched as he explained, "I didn't leave this place to you to rest. I'm going to look for a better vein of ore. We can't just ignore what happened today and ignore the future." Hearing that Xianxia was going to find a better mine, Zhou Xian immediately patted his chest and said, "Don't worry, Martial Uncle. Leave this place to me." Why did it sound like he was comforting someone who was about to die? Xianxia rolled his eyes and said, "Don't go out for the next 3 days. Don't worry and dig here. I'll bring you something to eat. Remember to dig it clean. Don't waste the exposed spirit stones." After Zhou Xian agreed, he was too lazy to say anything else. He turned around and went to find a good place to dig for spirit stones. Chapter 23. The next day, Xianxia, who had a bountiful harvest, found Zhou Xian with 2 roasted hares. He saw that Zhou Xian was grinning from ear to ear and was happily digging. The 2 baskets were filled to the brim and there was a big pile on the ground. Xianxia was shocked. He looked at where he dug and asked, "I think we've only dug 1/3 of the place? There's already so much?" Zhou Xian smiled and said, "Uncle Master found a great place. We've dug enough to hand in 7 or 8 times. It's just that it's not easy to transport so many spirit stones." Xianxia didn't expect to miss so many spirit stones. He said in a deep voice, "We can't hand them over all at once. We have to hide the rest for a rainy day. I found a good vein." "Uncle Master really found a good vein. That's enough for us to dig for a long time." Zhou Xian jumped in joy. "Eat something first." Xianxia passed a roasted hare to Zhou Xian. While eating, he said, "Later I will find a place to hide these spirit stones." Then he looked at Zhou Xian's reaction. If the latter showed even the slightest bit of hesitation, he would have to reconsider their future cooperation. To his satisfaction, Zhou Xian bit the hare and said without hesitation, "I'll follow Uncle Master's decision." In fact, Zhou Xian's thinking was simple. The spirit stones here saved time and effort. Uncle Master could even bring him to such a good place. What was there not to trust? Moreover, he could bring food in at any time. He could be considered to be very capable here. "Good." Xianxia praised and said, "Don't call me Uncle Master in the future. It's making me old." "That's not good, right?" Xiaotian let go of the hair. In this era where the hierarchy was strict, how could one not know one's seniority? Yu Qianchou waved his hand and said, "There's nothing bad about it." "Alright, then what should I call Uncle Master?" Hee hee. The corners of Yu Qianchou's mouth curled up slightly, but the smile froze on his face. Then he sighed with a pair of confused eyes. "Call me boss." Boss. Shi Shaoan muttered to himself, "Why does it feel like a secular gang name?" "Yes, just call me boss." Yu Qianchou's eyes lit up as he stared at him and said, "Little Tian, as long as you follow me wholeheartedly, I guarantee that you'll have a good life in the future and I'll even bring you home." Shi Shaotian, who felt that his future was bleak, seemed to have no other choice. He nodded and said, "I'll follow you, boss." "Quick, just you wait, Cultivation World. I Hu Hansen am back." Yu Qianchou laughed maniacally. That boss really made him feel good all over. Shi Shaotian was stunned. "Boss, who's Hu Hansen?" Yu Qianchou smiled sheepishly. "He's also a boss. After you finish eating, continue digging. I'll find a place to hide the spirit stones." The place he was talking about was naturally inside the golden bead. After 3 days, Gao Shiping, who was at the entrance of the cave, saw the two of them with a smile on his face. Yu Qianchou secretly stuffed another high-grade spirit stone into his hand. The former was overjoyed. Sect leader Ong Kwangtsung only got one high-grade spirit stone a month, but Gao Shiping got one every 4 days. At this rate it would be amazing. That's strange. The supervisor who counted the spirit stones for Yu Qianchou and Shi Shaotian muttered. Gao Shiping, who was chatting with Yu Qianchou, suddenly shivered. He turned around and asked, "What's wrong?" The supervisor replied, "The two of them have collected so many middle-grade and low-grade spirit stones. How could there not be a single high-grade spirit stone? Logically speaking, it's not possible. This is really strange." Yu Qianchou, who had a guilty conscience, was also slightly surprised. When he heard that it was this question, he heaved a sigh of relief. He glanced at Gao Shiping meaningfully. Gao Shiping almost fainted. He thought to himself, "I thought it was something serious. He gave me the high-grade spirit stone. How could you see it from there? This guy is too meddlesome. Looks like he needs to adjust." He then shouted, "What kind of spirit stone you get is a matter of luck. If you have any objections, I can let you have a taste of mining. I only have one question for you. Have they completed their task?" When the supervisor heard that he was asked to mine, he immediately shivered. He quickly replied, "Completed, completed." Both of them exceeded their quota. Gao Shiping snorted coldly. When Yu Qianchou and Shi Shaotian were done checking, he pulled them out for a drink. The supervisor was so scared that he was in a trance for a long time. In a wooden hut, wine and dishes were already prepared. Gao Shiping smiled and said, "Junior Marshall Brothers' place is too dark and damp. This place is for you to stay temporarily. Come, let's drink." Yu Qianchou did not stand on ceremony. After thanking Gao Shiping, he raised his cup and drank with him. Shi Shaotian, who was at the side, ate and drank at the same time. He thought to himself that he had really followed the right person. There were so many delicious dishes that he did not even dare to think about in the past. He kept pouring wine for the two of them. After eating and drinking, Gao Shiping left. Yu Qianchou asked Shi Shaotian to stay with him. He did not let him return to that lousy cave. Shi Shaotian was so touched that his eyes were brimming with tears. Yu Qianchou only said one thing. "Work hard with me. Good days are still ahead." After saying that, he changed into a set of clean clothes that Gao Shiping left behind. He moved out a chair and picked some wildflowers. He lay outside and basked in the sun. Smelling the fragrance of the flowers, he soon fell asleep with the smell of alcohol in his mouth. Wu Baoru woke up, but he was still ill. It should be known that it was not easy for cultivators to fall sick. The higher one's cultivation, the less likely it was for them to fall sick. However, he was so angry that he fell sick. His senior and junior brothers naturally knew the ins and outs of what happened that day. They did not know whether to laugh or cry and scolded Yu Qianchou for being a scoundrel. At this moment, another accident happened. It turned out that Wu Baoru, who was still ill, could not be angry. The moment he got out of bed, he heard many disciples discussing his despicable and shameless behavior. They were all talking about how he bullied Yu Qianchou. The rumors spread like wildfire. Wu Baoru was so angry that he vomited blood on the spot and fainted again. When he woke up he shouted that he wanted to kill Yu Qianqiu. However, no one would let him do that because Lu Chongqing had already made arrangements. What kind of place was the Spirit Stone Mine? As the sect master of Ong Guangtsung, how could Lu Chongqing not know that the reason he sent Yu Qianqiu there was to make him suffer a little? When he could not stand it anymore he would naturally be able to get the secret easily. Lu Wanwan was one of the elders of Ong Guangtsung. Today he was entrusted by the sect master to look for Yu Qianqiu at the Spirit Stone Mine. Before he left, he brought a few outstanding disciples and grand disciples with the purpose of letting everyone gain experience. Among them was Yu Qianqiu's fairy sister, Chu Ping. Hearing the news, Gao Shiping hurriedly used his qi to dispel the smell of alcohol and hurriedly welcomed them. Lu Wanwan did not reveal the main purpose of this trip. He only told him to bring his disciples to gain experience. Gao Shiping, who thought that the elders were here to inspect the work, heaved a sigh of relief. He immediately nodded and bowed as he personally led everyone to explain. When they saw the few sets of torture tools in the mine, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air, especially when they saw the legendary Wolf Fong whips of the Spirit Stone Mine. The ferocious barbs on the whips were frightening. Anyone could see that the dark red color on the whip was dyed with blood. At the side, Chu Pinger could not help but ask, "Martial Uncle Gao, will the newcomers also suffer from this whipping?" Gao Shiping did not know why she asked such a question. He laughed and said, "Very few newcomers can complete the task. Most of them will not be able to escape this calamity." After saying that, he led everyone to the miners' residence. In the dark and damp cave, a few miners huddled together and were sleeping on the ground. When Gao Shiping walked to almost every cave he shouted, "Wake up." The sleeping miners immediately jumped up as if it was a conditioned reflex. They stood together trembling with fear, not daring to make a sound. Looking at these skinny, dirty miners with tattered clothes, everyone could not help but sigh. Compared to Mount Qingguang, this place was simply hell on earth. They were all Ong Guangtsung disciples, but they did not expect the disparity to be so big. They all thought, in the future we must not end up like this. Lu Wanwan's purpose for coming here was to find Yu Qianqiu. Therefore he patiently followed everyone to look at the caves one by one. In the end, after looking at all the caves he did not see Yu Qianqiu. Instead he saw many familiar faces. Although they were all disciples of the younger generation, they had all treated him with great respect. Now that they had become like this, he could not help but feel somewhat rueful. Chu Ping also had the same goal. She wanted to see how the scholar was doing, but she was also afraid of seeing an unsightly and miserable sight. She could not tell what kind of mentality she was in. In the end she did not see anything. She could not help but become even more worried. She thought, "It's said that people dying in spirit stone mines is a very common thing. Could it be that he also, Martial Nephew Gao, are all the miners here?" Lu Wanwan had some doubts in his heart and asked with a frown. Gao Shiping said respectfully, "Martial Uncle, you know that some of the disciples have been taken care of by certain sect elders. Naturally it is not good to leave them here. If Martial Uncle wants to see them, please follow me." Seeing Lu Wanwan nod his head in agreement, Gao Shiping led everyone towards a row of wooden houses on the opposite side of the hill. Just as they walked up the hill, everyone smelled a strong smell of alcohol. Lu Wanwan turned his head to look and saw a young disciple sleeping soundly on a reclining chair while basking in the sun. He could not help but frown and ask, "What's going on?" Actually, when Gao Shiping walked up the hill he discovered Yu Qianqiu who was basking in the sun. He was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat and thought, "My ancestor, didn't he change a good place for you to sleep? Of all places to sleep you had to sleep here. This time I'm going to die because of you." Hearing Lu Wanwan's words he hurriedly ran over and shouted, "Junior Martial Brother Yu, Junior Martial Brother Yu, hurry up and wake up. The sect elders are here." Yu Qianqiu was sleeping soundly. He turned around and was unwilling to get up. Suddenly he heard someone say that the sect elders were here. In his mind he immediately thought of Wu Baoru and immediately had the urge to touch a brick. Unfortunately he did not feel anything. He immediately jumped up and shouted with sleepy eyes, "Damn it! Lingering around like a ghost, where is he? Where is he? My ancestor, please have mercy with your mouth." Gao Shiping almost shouted out loud. He hurriedly pulled him and said, "Junior Martial Brother, stop shouting. He's right here." You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.